Hello, and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Thursday, June 18th. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, Jon Elmer, Asa Winstanley, and Tamara Nassar. It's day 986 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Coming up, Ali will report on what is in the agreement to end the war of aggression launched by Washington and Tel Aviv. Although the text confirms Iran's enormous leverage, it won't necessarily be smooth sailing, as many difficult issues remain, and as Israel, which continues to attack and occupy Lebanon and Gaza, will be determined to unravel the agreement. Asa speaks with Palestine Action activist Zoë Rogers, who was acquitted of criminal damage after spending 18 months in custody for breaking into an 𝐓𝐡𝐞 Systems factory in Bristol and helping destroy drones that could have been used against Palestinians. Later on in the program, Jon will cover week 15 of the battle in South Lebanon, where Hezbollah shot down an Israeli flagship Heron drone using an advanced air defense missile, and while armed FPV drone operations continue to destroy Israeli military vehicles and chase down Israeli soldiers. But first, let's take a look at the news. Here's a brief summary of some of the latest developments this week in Palestine and Lebanon. As of this week, Israel has killed more than 1,000 Palestinians and injured nearly 3,200 in Gaza since the fraudulent ceasefire was declared last October. An Israeli drone bombed a group of Palestinians at a cafe on the beach in the Mawasi area of Khan Yunis, killing at least 2 and injuring many others on Wednesday, according to the Wafa news agency. Footage recorded by a local reporter show people on the sand underneath a shredded canopy in the aftermath of the drone strike, and crowds of people trying to rescue the dead and injured. On June 16th, an Israeli drone struck a crowd of Palestinians, killing 2 north of the Nuseirat refugee camp in central Gaza. Medical sources speaking to the Anadolu news agency said that the bodies were brought to Al-Auda hospital. 6 Palestinians, 3 of them children, were killed on Monday in a series of Israeli attacks in northern and central Gaza. An Israeli drone attacked and killed a child, Musa al-Habil, and his father, Mohammed, who was reported to be a nurse, in their home in the Sheikh Radwan neighborhood of Gaza City. Reporter Shams Omar captured footage of Musa being prepared for burial in the hospital, his small body being wrapped in a white shroud. Reports indicate that Musa and his father were collecting water on the roof of their home when the Israeli drone targeted and attacked them. Reporter Mohammed Jebrel filmed Musa's sister in agony over the bodies of her father and brother, screaming for her father to get up and not leave her alone. Also on Monday, an Israeli drone bombed a tent belonging to tailors in the Nuseirat refugee camp, killing a man and injuring others. A woman was hunted and killed by an Israeli drone near a mosque in Al-Zuwayda near Deir Abalah in central Gaza. And a toddler was kidnapped, detained, and returned dead by Israeli forces, along with his wounded father. According to Middle East Eye reporter Fayha Shalash, Baha Abu Ajin took his 3-year-old son Rayyan and his brother-in-law Khalid Abu Garaba to check on their farmland. Nawaf Abu Aljin, the family elder and a relative of Baha, told Middle East Eye that the three of them were shocked to see Israeli soldiers positioned inside a house in the area. The soldiers opened fire directly and without warning. The bullets immediately pierced Rayan's eye, causing it to gouge out, and exited the back of his head, Al-Ajin said. Another bullet struck his father Baha in the leg. The soldiers left the family members bleeding without providing any medical treatment, then detained the three of them and transported them in military vehicles to the Kisufim military base. Baha recounted what happened in a video testimony from his hospital bed. He said, quote, "My son still had life in him. I begged the soldier, save the boy, save the boy. I grabbed the phone telling him I was calling an ambulance, but he took the phone from me and said, don't call an ambulance, don't call anyone. He took the phone and the boy stayed in my arms dying. I kept telling him, save the boy, forget about me, save the boy. I don't matter. My leg is gone. It doesn't matter. God will make up for it. Just save the boy. I stayed there and he kept moving me around on the stretcher. He put me somewhere, I don't know where, then moved me to an area with no one around. He took me off the stretcher, tossed me off of it. He left me there. I passed out, unconscious and tied up. I looked up and found my son beside me. He didn't even mention my son. I looked over and put my hand on him. And there's my son beside me, wrapped in a dark shroud." Baha said that the soldier then threatened him with arrest and imprisonment. At midnight, the soldiers dumped the wounded Baha and his dead child on Salahuddin Street, Middle East Eye reports. They were taken to Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital, where Rayan was officially pronounced dead. Doctors in the hospital inserted a device in Baha's leg to stabilize the fracture. He remains hospitalized. Khalid, Baha's brother-in-law, remains in detention without any information about him, Middle East Eye reported. A third child, Riyad Abdullah Kadum, on Monday succumbed to injuries he had sustained during an Israeli airstrike on Gaza City a few days earlier, according to DropSite News. Israeli forces also continued to blow up homes in eastern Gaza City and fired heavily in Khan Yunis alongside artillery shelling, DropSite added. In northern Gaza's Jabalia refugee camp on Sunday, June 14th, an Israeli drone struck a group of Palestinians, killing at least 6. Reporter Nahed Hajjaj filmed the aftermath of the strike, with families and loved ones of those killed collapsing in grief over their bodies and demanding an end to the ongoing genocide. A Palestinian man was killed in a separate Israeli attack in Khan Yunis, according to the Shahab news agency. And a man in Gaza City died from his wounds from an Israeli helicopter gunship strike the day before. A 13-year-old child, Amir al-Bashiti, was killed on Saturday, June 13th, and another person was wounded by Israeli gunfire east of Khan Yunis. Reporter Hani al-Sha'ir filmed Amir's family mourning over his body. The Shahab news agency said that the Israeli soldiers shot the child in the neck. Overnight on June 11th and into the early hours of June 12th, Israel carried out a series of attacks on the Maghazi refugee camp in central Gaza, firing missiles and flattening homes. Reporter Mohammed Kassab filmed people assessing the damage Israel caused as entire homes and shelters were reduced to rubble. DropSite's contributor Mohammed Ahmed reported that the Israeli military issued forced displacement orders for several areas of Maghazi camp, covering schools, a rehabilitation center, the municipality building, and the area containing the camp's wells and its main source of fresh water. Hours later, Al-Maghazi came under heavy bombardment. Camp resident Shakir Shalabi told DropSite that one of his neighbors received a call from Israeli forces at around 10:30 p.m., ordering the area to evacuate, forcing most residents to leave. He said, quote, "They fired a missile, and in the second area, they also fired a missile. I don't know what the justification was for firing that missile that wiped out the entire neighborhood," Shalabi told DropSite. There were some homes standing. Look at the furniture. All of it is gone. The gas is gone. It's all gone. What can I say? It's all losses. This shows that Israel is a terrorist state, a state defined by attacks, he said. They don't want us here, although it is our homeland. Euromed Human Rights Monitor announced this week that they have closed their Gaza office after nearly 15 years of operation, quote, as a precautionary step following the recent Israeli threats, defamation, and punitive measures against the organization and its staff. These measures, Euromed says, come in response to the group's professional documentation of the genocide Israel has been committing in the Gaza Strip since October 2023. Quote, in recent weeks, especially following the release of a report detailing sexual violence crimes against Palestinians in Israeli prisons and detention centers, Israeli officials, government entities, ministers, public figures, and major propaganda channels have initiated a coordinated campaign of incitement and defamation targeting Euromed Monitor and its staff. At the end of May, Euromed says that Israeli authorities implemented punitive measures restricting the movement of 40 individuals associated with Euromed, including board members, staff, volunteers, and partners. These measures are part of the broader official and unofficial pressure Israel is applying to prevent the organization from documenting Israeli crimes. Importantly, the rights group adds that the closure of their Gaza office, quote, does not mean a suspension of its work or a retreat from its moral and professional responsibilities to document violations, support victims, and preserve evidence and testimonies in accordance with recognized professional and legal standards. Rather, this decision is a response to valid safety concerns, especially given the increasing Israeli threats and the role of official Israeli entities leading the campaign. The Israeli campaign targeting Euromed, quote, is part of a larger pattern of suppressing human rights defenders, journalists, and humanitarian workers in Gaza, with the goal of silencing and eliminating independent voices that report serious violations and highlight their effects on victims and survivors. Euromed Human Rights Monitor says that it, quote, affirms that its work did not start because conditions were safe or easy, and it will not end under any circumstances because Israeli authorities have decided to raise the cost of that work. Meanwhile, Israel has been steadily creeping its so-called yellow line westward, displacing dozens of families and turning neighborhoods into live fire zones. A report this week in the New Arab documents the movement of concrete barriers by Israeli tanks in eastern Gaza City, quote, with artillery and military activity, forcing the families near Salahuddin Street to abandon their homes multiple times since the war began, according to Mohammed Asfour, a resident in the area. The resident told the New Arab that the recent expansion, quote, extended the line roughly 300 meters west, bringing Israeli-controlled zones closer to densely populated residential areas. Israel's yellow line now encompasses well over 60% of Gaza's area, just weeks after Israeli Prime Minister and war crimes suspect Benjamin Netanyahu directed the army to push deeper westwards. Mahmoud Bassal, the spokesperson for Gaza's civil defense, told the publication that residents have repeatedly found themselves waking up to shifting realities on the ground. Quote, since the ceasefire came into effect, Israeli forces have continued moving the concrete blocks that mark the boundaries of the yellow zone, Bassal said. The line is not fixed. Residents often go to sleep believing they are outside the danger area and wake up to discover the boundary has moved overnight. A similar feature in Middle East Eye this week says that since the so-called ceasefire was signed in October, quote, Israeli bulldozers have been hard at work reducing buildings to rubble, while demolition teams bring down larger structures. Israeli ministers such as Bezalel Smotrich have repeatedly announced their aim of leveling the Palestinian territory with the aim of encouraging Palestinians to voluntarily leave, Middle East Eye notes. The Israeli High Court rejected the appeal by Dr. Hassam Abu Safia against the extension of his administrative detention this week. Last week, as we reported, Dr. Abu Safia, the pediatrician and director of Kamal Adwan Hospital in Beit Lahia, who was abducted by Israeli forces in December 2024 and has been held in detention ever since, was transferred to solitary confinement in Nafha prison last week as the High Court considered his appeal. On Tuesday, June 16th, the court ruled that he will continue to be held without charge or trial under the, quote, unlawful combatants law. Dr. Abu Safia's attorney, Nasser Oda, stated that the Israeli High Court's decision is, quote, in clear contradiction with international law and the Geneva Conventions, which provides special protection for medical personnel during armed conflicts. Dr. Abu Safia remains held in solitary confinement in Nafha prison under harsh detention conditions, deprived of necessary medical treatment, and of the most basic rights guaranteed to him, Oda said. Speaking to the New Arab, Dr. Abu Safia's son, Elias, said that seeing his father appear before the court last week in a visibly weakened condition had left the family heartbroken. This is an extremely difficult feeling, one that cannot be described in words. After seeing the last image of my father showing signs of pain, exhaustion, emaciation, a weakened body, and skin diseases, Elias said. It is certainly a very sad feeling to see your father in such a condition while being unable to protect him or offer him anything beyond appeals and calls for action, he added. Dr. Abu Safia, as we have been reporting, has been subjected to extreme torture and medical neglect by Israeli prison guards since his abduction a year and a half ago. He's one of 14 Palestinian doctors from Gaza currently being jailed by Israel without charge. In related news, medical professionals and civil society organizations around the world are urging the World Medical Association to dump the Israeli Medical Association, the IMA, over the state's failure ethical standards. More than 1,600 health professionals and rights groups say that the Israeli body has been failing to uphold the core medical ethical standards and alleging that it has been complicit in, quote, serious violations of medical neutrality and human rights committed by Israel's government and military. In a petition, the experts have called on the international medical body to suspend Israel ahead of their General Assembly in Rotterdam in early October. Middle East Eye reports that the signatories note that Israeli forces have attacked healthcare in Palestine, Lebanon, and Iran, and have killed, detained, and obstructed healthcare professionals. It states that Israeli medical professionals were complicit in the inhumane treatment of Palestinians within Israeli prisons by failing to document and investigate violations of medical ethics over the past 3 decades. Quote, the IMA has done nothing to oppose the killing and injuring of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in Gaza or the destruction of the health service there, they wrote. On the contrary, by endorsing the call by 80 Israeli doctors who publicly called for the bombing of Gaza's hospitals in November 2023, the IMA effectively gave the green light for the genocide. The signatories called on the World Medical Association to cut institutional ties with the Israeli Medical Association, following the lead of the South African Medical Association and the British Medical Association. An article about the petition was published by medical journal The Lancet in recent days, which had identified that the Israeli Medical Association had not published any statements that, quote, publicly condemned Israeli attacks on Gaza's health system, criticized Israeli conduct in the war, called for a ceasefire, or responded to UN reports of genocide against Palestinians. Turning to the occupied West Bank, Israeli soldiers struck and injured a 15-year-old Palestinian girl with live ammunition on Tuesday in Al-Mughayr, east of Ramallah, during an invasion into the village. The Wafa news agency reported that the girl was shot in the shoulder and was in a nearby hospital in stable condition. The army had closed the entrances to the village while shooting bullets and tear gas. Nearby in Al-Bireh, Israeli forces stormed the city and fired sound bombs and tear gas during an invasion and shot live ammunition at young men on Tuesday evening. Also on Tuesday, Israeli soldiers invaded the village of Deir Abu Mashhal, and fired tear gas into a group of journalists who were covering local protests by Palestinian residents of the village against settler encroachment on their land. Settlers have been attempting to establish a new colony on the village land, and residents have been protesting every day this week. On June 12th, Israeli forces invaded the town after Friday prayers, and settlers carried out attacks against residents. One man speaking to reporters from the hospital said that, quote, 30 settlers attacked the four of us. They kept beating us until we couldn't move. It was just one in a series of settler attacks across the West Bank this week. In Beita, settlers carried out an attack on Palestinians, injuring 4 on Wednesday morning. Local sources told the Wafa news agency that settlers from the newly established outpost on land south of the town attacked homes, damaged several vehicles, and broke windows before residents confronted them. The sources added that Israeli forces later stormed the area and physically assaulted residents. Settlers targeted at least 4 mosques around the West Bank since June 14th. In Burqa on June 14th, Israeli settlers set fire to a mosque while worshippers were inside, according to local reports. In Deir Dibwan on the same day, Israeli settlers committed arson on a mosque, set fire to several vehicles in front of it, and poured gasoline on an elderly man in an attempt to burn him alive. 92-year-old Yasser Rashid said that a settler poured gas on the window of the mosque to start a fire. He wanted to burn me alive, he told Al Jazeera. I was shocked by a settler holding a petrol bomb, pointing it at my face and clothes near the window, he added. In a video testimony, Rashid said that, quote, he sprayed me and the window, then set it on fire. The window caught fire and I stepped back. He added that his car and another car were set on fire as well. On June 17th, settlers committed a similar attack in Jaljulia, north of Ramallah, just before dawn prayers, setting fire to the Grand Mosque and spray painting racist graffiti on the walls.
شباب وينكم يا شباب؟ المستوطنين ولعوا الجامع تعالوا. واتساب شانل.
Sources told the Wafa news agency that town residents confronted the settlers as they attempted to burn the mosque, while Israeli forces later stormed the town and fired tear gas and stun grenades on Palestinians, with injuries being reported. In a similar incident, settlers broke into the Al-Farouq Mosque in Mazra al-Nubani and set it on fire, resulting in damage to the building and its contents, Wafa added. Settlers also attacked and destroyed the only water pipeline supplying the village of Safa in the central West Bank on Monday, while bulldozing Palestinian land and constructing a road to connect nearby settlement colonies. In Lebanon on Wednesday, Israel continued its ongoing violations of a so-called ceasefire after declaring its refusal to abide by the conditions of the Memorandum of Understanding signed by the US and Iran, which would entail that Israel stop its massacres and land theft in Lebanon. Israeli warplanes carried out airstrikes on the town of Nabatia al-Fawqa, as well as on the eastern outskirts of the neighboring town of 𝐓𝐡𝐞, according to Al-Mayadeen. For more on the situation on the ground in Lebanon, our contributor Roqayah Chamseddine filed this report for the Electronic Intifada on Wednesday evening.
Roqayah Chamseddine reporting for the Electronic Intifada. Despite the newly announced US-Iran Memorandum of Understanding, which is intended in part to halt Israeli attacks on Lebanon, Israeli forces have sustained a campaign of aggression and colonial land grab across South Lebanon. Israel has explicitly rejected the framework of the agreement, with Netanyahu vowing that occupation forces will not pull back and will maintain their self-declared buffer zone over hundreds of square kilometers of sovereign Lebanese territory. On the ground over the past 48 hours, Israel has engaged in attempts at territorial expansion and calculated attacks. In 𝐓𝐡𝐞 occupation forces launched a multi-axis push toward 𝐓𝐡𝐞. The Lebanese resistance successfully repelled an initial infantry advance, prompting the occupation to reinforce the axis with a mechanized column consisting of 5 Merkava tanks and armored vehicles. Following this tactical repulse, the Israeli military unleashed intensive artillery barrages and airstrikes across the area. Warplanes and drones targeted 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿 Ansariya and the heights of Al Tahir Hill, firing dozens of shells that ignited major fires in local woodlands. Further south, in Haddatha and across 4 other occupied border towns, Israeli engineering units carried out systematic demolitions, blowing up entire residential blocks to enforce a depopulated buffer zone. The Lebanese resistance has actively countered these incursions, confirming a successful explosive drone strike that targeted an occupation gathering in the south, wounding at least 10 Israeli soldiers. Meanwhile, thousands of forcibly displaced families are defying the occupation's threats and attempting to return to their ancestral villages. They face severe danger not only from hovering drones, but also from unexploded ordnances and massive aerial bombs embedded in the ruins of civilian homes. Politically, the Lebanese resistance has welcomed the international diplomatic efforts by Iran to end the broader war, but firmly maintains its stance on national defense. Hezbollah leadership has reaffirmed that there will be no compromise on Lebanon's right to self-defense and no pause in operations until a total end of aggression is achieved and every occupation soldier is completely expelled from Lebanese soil.
That was Roqayah Chamseddine reporting for the Electronic Intifada from Lebanon on Wednesday. We've published many features in the last week, but today we're highlighting Our Futures Are Shrinking by Qasim Walid Al-Farra, writing from Gaza. Every week I visit my aunt Nada, who lives in downtown Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. Her small home is damaged but livable, with a bathroom, a modest kitchen setup, and a bedroom down the narrow hall with 2 mattresses pushed up against the wall. I sometimes help my cousin Noor, 14, with her math and English, and I also sit with my cousin Salah, 11, who has a cognitive disability. Their father was killed by an Israeli airstrike in the early months of the genocide, so I run errands for the family and help in whatever way I can with repairs and whatnot. My aunt's family and mine spent most of the last year living together in the same tent, and during that time I bonded with Salah, who is very close with his father. He now frequently scrolls through his father's phone, crying a little as he looks at photos and videos. After my visits, I roam the streets of Khan Yunis, and on these walks, I have noticed that since the so-called ceasefire of October 2025, people are returning to the city and to their homes, or rather, what remains of them. Many have erected tents on the sites where their homes used to be, since so few were left standing after relentless Israeli attacks. Khan Yunis is a family-based community. Every big family resides in a certain part of the city, so it's easy to notice the return of many people. Major streets like Al-Bahr are also starting to wake up and are once again filled with shops and street vendors, though not quite to the extent that they used to be. What once distinguished Al-Bahr Street for me was the feeling of chaos and randomness in all of the shops and stalls. Each shop would have its own music blaring, and during Eid, spice merchants would draw unique illustrations on their spice boxes. Al-Bahr Street, though more lively than it was a year ago, is not like that now. One wonders if it will ever be like that again, especially since downtown Khan Yunis is a little less than a kilometer from the Israeli Yellow Line, behind which Israel has razed Palestinian homes and constructed military infrastructure. The Yellow Line is an attempt to claim vast swaths of Palestinian land. Israel has seized about 60% of Gaza so far, a percentage set to rise, according to Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, who wants to take 70%. This Yellow Line is what prevents our complete return to the city, especially for those of us like myself who reside on the eastern side of Khan Yunis. My obliterated neighborhood and obliterated home are still under occupation by Israeli forces. The nearest I can get to my home is the Abu Humaid roundabout, about a kilometer west of Salahuddin Street, which is practically where the yellow line begins. Taking a step eastward from that point can be deadly. Israel shot dead 2 of my neighbors, Mohammed Abdul Hamid al-Farah, 23, in February 2026, and Khamis al-Qasas, 37, in April 2026, as they tried to check on our neighborhood from afar. When I approached the yellow line this past May, I could see the Israeli military base that is under construction at the Bani Suhaila roundabout. I saw huge sand berms that surround the base, as well as the security fences and the military guard tower. Looking eastward from the Abu Humaid roundabout toward my former neighborhood, the area looks symmetrical in its ruined state. It's as if you placed a mirror in front of another mirror, and what you get is an endless repetition of the same picture. What can one do from this position, so close to your home, yet unable to step toward it? How can anyone remain sane after seeing their past crushed under Israeli bulldozers? The word displaced in English softens our misery, as place is still a part of the word. For me, for Palestinians in Gaza, place is being erased, and the more accurate description of our condition is exile, defined as a period of forced absence from one's country. We are exiled in our own land. Physically, I have not left my city, Khan Yunis. I still exist here, though displaced in a different part of it for over a year. Yet Israel exiled us physically as well as emotionally. That is why when we commemorate the Nakba on May 15th, we revive and solidify our right to return that it has been stolen by Israel. But throughout 78 years of Nakba, the borders have shrunk, and so have our dreams of returning. When I heard about the killings of my neighbors, the ones who had tried to return to our neighborhood beyond the yellow line, I had wondered why anyone would put themselves in danger for a mere look at a destroyed past. Though there are many accounts of Israel's moving the yellow line, leading people to unknowingly venture past it and think they are safe from Israeli fire. Yet standing at the Abu Humaid roundabout, looking at the gray destruction, I could still see the big old eucalyptus tree in my neighbor's backyard. Surrounded by leveled houses, the old tree is standing higher than any other structure on the block. Most of its branches are broken and jagged, others stripped bare. I cannot say I felt hope in those moments, or that my memories were more accessible, as the equation laid out by the occupying army is so blatantly clear. The more it digs into my land, the narrower our prospects of a dignified future. Those are excerpts from Our Futures Are Shrinking by Qasim Walid Al-Farah, writing from Gaza on electronicintifada.net. And now, as we always do, we wanted to highlight people expressing joy, determination, and reclamation across Palestine and around the world. In Gaza, journalist Bilal Osama captured a group of kids practicing football on an unusual pitch. He says, quote, "Amid the rubble of homes in Gaza, children continue to pursue their passion for football despite immense challenges. After the destruction of stadiums and sports clubs, they have turned the ruins into makeshift playing fields, holding on to their dreams of one day joining international clubs and taking part in the FIFA World Cup. As they chase the ball through the debris, they cling to the hope that one day they will be able to fulfill their ambitions and play the sport they love in a safe environment far from the devastation of war."
خليكوا في الدائرة خليكوا في الدائرة خليكوا
And that's it for the news roundup. As always, go to electronicintifada.net for much more, especially to read our new features by our brave writers in Gaza. You're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleague Ali Abunimah. Hi, Ali.
Hi, Nora, and hello to everyone who's watching us live and to everyone who is participating in the comments. We appreciate you being here this week, as you have been for now almost 1,000 days. And what a devastating report, Nora.
Yeah.
Even the uplifting part, seeing those kids play football against that background of devastation, is just so heartbreaking. And the story of Baha and his son Rayan and what Israel did to them is, I've seen so many people just devastated by that. And
he's 3 years old.
Yeah. And 1,000 people this week, 1,000 people, that the health ministry announced that the number killed has reached 1,000 since the so-called ceasefire. What kind of ceasefire is that?
It's not. And the depravity that Israel keeps meting out on Palestinians in Gaza, especially children. There were so many children this week who were killed and injured, and like Rayan, that 3-year-old boy, just sadistically treated by the Israeli soldiers, or his father's talking about, carrying his son. And at first, the bullet went, the soldier aimed for his head and the bullet went through his eye. And the child could have been saved, but the soldier told his
because
father,
the purpose is to kill. And that's why medicine is not being allowed in sufficient quantities. That's why the health sector is be allowed to recover, because Israel wants to continue the genocide. It wants to kill and kill and kill.
Yeah, it is a compulsion as policy.
All day, every day, to quote Arnon Sofer, the notorious Israeli professor and government advisor, from his interview in the Jerusalem Post in 2004, to kill and kill and kill all day, every day. That is Israel. Yeah,
that's what it's always been. It is more naked in the past 2.5 years of this genocide. And as we'll get into it, coming up after our next segment, you talk about how Israel is determined to sabotage the memorandum of understanding between the US and Iran, because it wants to keep killing Palestinians in Palestine and Lebanon. And so we're going to talk more about that, of course, what the MOU means for Gaza and Lebanon. But first, before we introduce Asa's segment on Palestine Action, where people have been, of course, for the last couple of years, trying to physically stop these weapons companies that are based in the UK to help Israel kill children, and being jailed and prescribed for it. You are going on a trip next week.
That's right. I'm not going to be on the program next week, but I'm going to be very busy. I'm going to Switzerland. I'm going back to Switzerland for the first time since I was illegally arrested in January 2025, and then expelled, imprisoned, and then expelled to prevent me from speaking about the genocide in Gaza. And I'm going back for two reasons. One is there is a legal hearing in two of the criminal cases I brought related to that. We already won our administrative cases in the Zurich court and the federal courts. We've talked about that before. So these are separate criminal cases. The second reason is that the good people who invited me back in January 25, Watermelon University, have invited me to come back and actually do the teach-in that we were illegally prevented from doing in January 2025. So that will happen in Zurich on June 23rd. And tomorrow, that's Friday morning, I'm going to publish an article at the Electronic Intifada talking a bit more about my trip to Switzerland. And I will link to details of that event in Zurich on Tuesday, June 23rd in the evening, where I'm looking forward to meeting people and speaking about the genocide, doing what we were entitled to do in January 2025 and illegally prevented from doing. I said I would be back, and I'm very happy to be coming back.
Man of his word. Thank you so much, Ali. And yeah, we'll look forward to your op-ed coming out tomorrow on electronicintifada.net, detailing the latest updates in your case and your talk and the action against the Zurich government, of course. Thank you, Ali. And so next week we will still have a show, regular time, regular channel. But Ali, you will be busy, so we'll see you in 2 weeks. Let's bring Asa on to talk about the segment that we're gonna watch next. Hi, Asa.
Hi, everybody.
Tell us about the interview that you did with Zoe, which we will play in just a minute, and what you wanted to kind of preface the interview with.
Yeah, well, as you said, Nora, we interviewed Zoë Rogers, former Palestine Action political prisoner who spent 18 months on remand as punishment for her activism. And she's going to talk about that in the interview that we did. But before we get into it, I wanted to play a clip of what they actually did. So let's have a look. Thanks, Tamara.
Yeah.
Well, so that was 𝐓𝐴𝐷 Systems factory in Filton, outside Bristol, as you mentioned. And you can see there, you know, the material information says 𝐓𝐴𝐷 Systems. And you can see quadcopter drones of the type that are used to sadistically murder Palestinian children in Gaza. And as you know, we get into in the interview, there was more than £1 million, I think £1.4 million worth of damage caused by these campaigners, by these direct action campaigners during this direct action that they took.
And as you'll talk about in the interview, just in the last few days, really, the UK government, the court, has handed down some just completely draconian prison sentences for some of the actionists, and they're trying to re-proscribe Palestine Action as a terrorist group in the UK. So I know you'll get into that in the interview. Anything else you want people to note before we go to it?
No, I think that's it. I mean, I think Zoe's a really good spokesperson for herself and for, you know, a good representative of what of their aims and what they did. And, you know, I learned a lot from the interview.
Great. All right, let's go to that now.
In the Electronic Intifada live stream, I'm Asa Winstanley. Direct Action Solidarity Group Palestine Action's campaign against Israeli arms firm 𝐓𝐴𝐷 Systems suffered 2 significant setbacks here in the UK this week. Last Friday, the first of the Filton 25 prisoners to stand trial was sentenced with extremely harsh prison terms after a highly political retrial in which 4 of them were convicted of criminal damage against 𝐓𝐴𝐷's drone factory in Filton near Bristol in the west of England. The judge, Jeremy Johnson, was harshly critical of the 4, in his sentencing remarks on Friday, which struck a highly politicized chord. He was booed by protesters outside Woolwich Crown Court, who played his remarks live on their PA system. And as you can see in this footage that Tamara is playing, a reported 107 supporters of Palestine Action were also arrested under the Terrorism Act for holding signs that read, "Direct action is not terrorism. I support Palestine Action." Despite the fact that none of the four were ever charged with any offences under Britain's draconian Terrorism Act, Johnson claimed that there was nonetheless a, quote, terrorist connection, and this led to longer sentences, time served in prison, and potentially even lifetime restrictions on the four. Fatima Zainab Rajwani, 21, was jailed for 5 years and 8 months, less 45 days. She'll be eligible for parole after 4 years and 200 days. Charlotte Head, 30, and Leona Cameo, 30, were each jailed for 6 years, less 45 days. The pair will be eligible for parole after 4 years and 320 days. And finally, Samuel Corner, 23, was sentenced to 8 years and 8 months in prison. He will be only eligible for parole after 7 years and 8 months. His sentence was higher because he was also convicted of causing grievous bodily harm to a police officer, something he said was done in defense of his fellow protesters who were being attacked at the time by police and security guards, as footage showed at the trial proved. The second setback for Palestine Action came on Monday as judges at the Court of Appeal sided with the British government in its appeal of the High Court's previous ruling in February that Prime Minister Keir Starmer's ban on Palestine Action as a quote-unquote terrorist group was unlawful. The new ruling on Monday means that the terrorist ban is, for the moment, effectively upheld. But speaking to the media this week, Palestine Action's co-founder, Huda Amori, who you see in this article on screen, and has been taking forward efforts to overturn the ban in the courts, she swore to take her appeal all the way to the Supreme Court and even higher if needed. She said to The Guardian, quote, "I'm certain that legally we are correct, that this ban is disproportionate to free speech and the right to protest. I think that's really clear. We just need to get to the High Court. We just need to get to the right court that's going to recognize that, and we'll take it all the way up to the European Court of Human Rights if needs be." When the Filton protesters first stood trial at the start of the year, there were in fact 6 defendants. But 2 of those, Jordan Devlin and Zoë Rogers, were acquitted of criminal damage and set free. We're very lucky today to be joined by Zoë to discuss all this. Zoë, welcome to the Electronic Intifada.
Thank you for having me.
We're very pleased that you could spend some time with us today. We know you've been very active in solidarity with your fellow Filton prisoners, and when I've been out to see some of these protests, I've seen you there, and your mother has been very active as well in the solidarity campaign. So we know you're very busy, so we're very grateful for you spending some time today to talk about all these issues.
Of course.
So, first of all, how did it feel for you in Woolwich on Friday as the sentences against your friends were read out by the judge?
Yeah, it was, I suppose, mixed emotions, because we already knew this was going to happen. It was very obvious that this entire thing was orchestrated purely to engineer convictions with a terrorism connection. But it was incredible to see all of the support outside. We've never had a mobilization like that before, and to have over 100 people arrested under the Terrorism Act was, it was an incredible display of solidarity.
Yeah, I went along on Friday as well myself, and I'd only been to I think one previous of the demonstrations outside Woolwich Crown Court, and this one was huge. As you said, it was particularly huge. There was several hundred people there at the very least, and as you said, over 100 people arrested for holding up those signs. The civil disobedience campaign that's been going on for the last year against the ban on Palestine Action, sort of defying the ban by saying that they support Palestine Action. and I've seen a lot of people on social media kind of contrasting the arrests of these civil disobedience sitters with the signs, who are often, not always, but often older people who feel this is some concrete act of solidarity they can take with Gaza and with the Palestinians, and contrasting that with the police's and the government's reaction to the racist riots that we've seen happen in the UK. Seems to be every summer now, and Muslims being attacked and firebombed and so forth, and that's not treated as terrorism in any way. It's just treated as a kind of public order, whereas this peaceful act of civil disobedience is treated literally as terrorism.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, terrorism has always been a political label, and I think people are starting to recognise that, and it's particularly been weaponised. Well, initially in this country it was weaponised against Irish people, and that turned into weaponising it against brown people, in particular Muslims and Palestinians especially. So it's not a surprise that that's how terrorism law is being used, because that's exactly what it was intended for.
Absolutely, yeah, that's the way it was set up. Well, you yourself spent 18 months on remand in jail for taking part, as you said openly, we're not putting you in any legal jeopardy by saying this. You said in court that you took part in this direct action against the Filton factory, and you were nonetheless acquitted of criminal damage. But because of this extraordinary politicization and this kind of tarring of Palestine Action with the terrorism label, even though you were only charged with criminal damage, you weren't charged with any actual concrete terrorism offense. The law itself is political, but nonetheless, you weren't even charged with that law. Nonetheless, because there was all this talk of a quote-unquote terrorism connection, which is an extra layer of politics, of politicization of the law on top of the existing law itself, you and the others spent 18 months on remand in jail, which must have been, which is extraordinary for criminal damage, which is something that you would absolutely not nominally have been put on that length of remand for in any way. So, tell us a little bit about that experience for you and the others in jail, and how did you cope with life in prison? Yeah,
so because of the terrorism connection, we were treated as terrorist prisoners. So our security was managed by the terrorism section of the security team in Bronzefield, which was the prison I was in. But it was the same across the board in all prisons, really. And so anything Palestine related was essentially criminalized. There's a kind of a court system within the prisons, and so one of my co-defendants was taken to trial in prison for knitting a scarf with the Palestine colours on it. We had keffiyehs banned, and we were also subject to extra security measures such as our mail being withheld. One officer threatened to ban my phone calls because I was speaking to my mum and my sister at the same time, which is something other prisoners do very regularly, but for some reason it wasn't allowed for us. So yeah, we did face extra repression, but it was pretty horrible sitting in prison knowing that, it was a ramp up for a trial. We weren't able to properly prepare because we were in prison, and you don't have anywhere near the access to legal materials that you need in order to prepare for trial. And also knowing that once we got to trial, we would not be able to have a fair trial.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that you would be reluctant to compare yourself to Palestinian political prisoners, but nonetheless, I can't help but be reminded in some respects of the way that Palestinian prisoners are treated, at least in terms of the vindictive nature of the punishment of Palestinian prisons. I'm not saying you went through any of the kind of torture and even worse that Palestinian prisoners went through and are going through systematically in Israel's essentially torture dungeons in occupied Palestine. But nonetheless, the vindictive and political nature of the way that the prison officials seem to want to just punish you and kind of set an example, it seems to I mean, I'm sure it derives from their own kind of sadism of the prison system in this country, but also it seems to me to be a kind of political pressure that comes with a kind of need to kind of set a punitive example for you to sort of stop others following your example.
Yeah, well, we have to remember that the Israelis learnt from the British. I was actually talking to a former Palestinian prisoner recently, and he talked a lot about how the prisons in Israel were set up by the British, and Israel continued to build on British methods of punishment. Yeah, I think we got a very, very, very small taste of what it's like. But I have the utmost respect and admiration for all of the Palestinian political prisoners as a result of my experiences. And I'm actually quite grateful for them to have a small insight into what it's like and what they've been through. And it makes me admire even more the ways in which they've managed to resist and to educate themselves despite being in prison.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely true what you're saying. You know, many of the military laws that Israel uses against Palestinians to this day are actually literally the same laws inherited from the British occupation, including the prisoners who are held without charge or trial indefinitely, without even going through the farce of the military court system, which in itself is a farce. And that came from the British, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So the prosecutors, I was reading a press release earlier this week from the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 25 Solidarity Committee, and it said that prosecutors in the retrial, so to clarify a little, there was a trial which concluded an initial trial of the first six of the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 25 prisoners, which concluded in February, and you and your friend Jordan were acquitted of criminal damage, despite the fact that you said you took part in this direct action. And all of you in that trial, all six, were acquitted of the most serious charges, which could have potentially led to as much as many years in prison, many more years than even these very harsh sentences. Luckily you were acquitted of all those charges, but the jury failed to reach a conclusion on some of the other charges, mainly the criminal damage. And so four of you went to this retrial, and these were the sentences handed out on Friday. And nonetheless, in the run up to this sentencing on Friday, the prosecutors actually revealed the fact that you caused, as a group, more than £1.2 million worth of damages to the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 factory. I believe that's probably something like $1.6 million, around that sort of figure for our most of our viewers are in the US. So you cause a lot of damage to the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 factory, including the destruction of more than 40 drones, weapon systems, targeting systems. I'm quite interested to know, Zoe, like, had you realized before this information came out this week that you'd been so successful? Like, had they substantiated it in any way? Like, did you realize how successful you'd been, or how did it seem at the time? Obviously, you were arrested on the night.
Well, we knew that we destroyed drones because that was quite obvious. We didn't really know how much damage we'd done because despite the fact that we'd gone through 2 entire trials in which the prosecution is supposed to provide all of the evidence against you, that's not actually what happened. And so after almost 2 years after we broke into and smashed up weapons, it took them that long to produce a damages report. And so no, we didn't know. And the reason why it took them that long was because they didn't want to put in front of the jury concrete evidence that we were right, that we had found Israeli weapons and smashed them up, because that would have been a point in our favour. And both trials were engineered to take away any argument the defence had.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see so much doublespeak from these companies, because a lot of these factories and Elbit-owned institutions are owned by kind of essentially front companies for Elbit, like they're local quote unquote defense companies. They're arms manufacturers essentially in Britain. Sometimes they're being bought out by Elbit, and sometimes they're more sort of front kind of shell organizations, you could say. And they kind of try to have it both ways. Like they sort of say, oh, well, there's, we're a legitimate defense company. And then at other times they say, oh, this has got nothing to do with Gaza. We're a British company. And all this kind of stuff. And oh, it's just for the British military and all this kind of nonsense. So, but like, I know from experience with with the Palestine Action. I mean, I've been following Palestine Action since it started 6 years ago now, and I know from experience that the research that has gone into these actions is very, very good. Like, it's very detailed, and I actually learned most of what I know about it from Palestine Actions, or I did anyway in the past before it was banned and stopped operating. I learned so much from them, from what they, from the research that goes into all these things. So it's not just like, there are some critics of direct action who say, oh, just smashing things up for the sake of it. But that's not how it's gone in reality. I know that this is, very deliberately targeted and very planned in some detail. And this, I think, damage assessment, if you will, which was provided by it seems Elbit indirectly to the prosecutors, confirms all that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can tell you a bit about what we actually smashed up.
Please.
You'd like that. So there were 3 different types of drones inside the factory. So there were Magni-X drones, which work to surveil and pick out targets. And they work in fleets of drones, and they can work alongside Thor drones, which was another type of drone that we found. And there were 2 variations of Thor drones. So there was the Legion X drone, and forgotten the name of the other one off the top of my head.
Now, are these the sort of quadcopter drones?
Yes. So the Thor ones can be modified to add weapons underneath, and they can drop bombs. There's a particular type of bomb that's designed just for the Thor drone. It's called the Terminate Thor, which is just a sick joke about killing people. But they can be adapted to carry anything up to, I think it's 8 kilograms, like any kind of weapon up to 8 kilograms. And then we found another drone, which we're not entirely sure about because it was redacted in the report, because they wanted to hide what it was from us. It was the only one that we hadn't managed to identify in the trial without having any evidence from the prosecution or Elbit Systems, because they refused to provide it. But we believe it's a collaboration between Elbit Systems and Easy Aerial, which is an American company that was founded by Israeli soldiers that work closely with the Israeli military. And it's likely that it was some kind of prototype in testing, because the Elbit factory we broke into was a research and development factory. And if that's true, it's likely that we delayed the production process by quite a long time. And that also, had these drones been developed further, they would have actually been tested in Gaza, because what Elbit does with all of its weapons is it tests them on Palestinians first, so it can advertise them as battle tested.
Yeah, quite proudly. Yeah, they've done that for many years. Palestine and Gaza especially has been often the kind of laboratory of oppression for Israel. It's how Israel markets its kind of value, as it were, to the imperialists. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm sure our viewers and listeners will definitely applaud you for the actions that you took. What message do you think that the harsh sentences that were given on Friday were intended to send out to Palestine solidarity campaigners in the UK? And do you think that message will work?
Well, we saw someone took action yesterday, so clearly it hasn't worked.
Tell us
but
about
yeah.
that.
Oh, there was a lock-on outside a factory in Kent. Despite the fact that that was the day the Court of Appeal upheld prescription. But the intended is very clear what the intended message is. They're trying to dissuade people from taking direct action, despite the fact that it's the only effective way to stop the supply of weapons to Israel. And they're doing that because this country is so intent on putting the profits of an Israeli weapons company and its own relationship with Israel above the rights of its own citizens. But as we've seen with an action that's already taken place, not only post the sentencing, but post prescription, is that people are not afraid. And in fact, people are escalating. And we've seen this with the DOJ campaign, where
Defend our juries, yeah.
Defend our juries, yeah. Where people are now not only just holding up signs, but claiming to be members of Palestine Action, which can land you in prison for 14 years.
Yeah. And there's been, I've lost count now, but I think there's certainly been more than 1,000 people arrested over the course of the last year. Does that sound like an accurate figure?
So yesterday's a spokesperson from DOJ said over 3,000 people.
Oh wow, okay. I'm clearly not being keeping
So yeah,
up.
a lot of people.
More than 3,000 over the last year have been arrested under the Terrorism Act for holding up signs saying that they support Palestine Action. I mean, it's an act of mass civil disobedience, which I think has been effective because we've seen it being referred to despite these rulings. Some of the rulings, like the Court of Appeal, going against Palestine Action. Nonetheless, they've had to take it into account that it's not just affecting, a small group of extremists as they would portray it, but this is a mass movement that is supported by many, many more people, and even thousands willing to risk legal jeopardy. Yeah. So, and as you mentioned, direct action is still going on. There's new groups and organizations that are kind of forming, even though Palestine Action has been banned, and they're still carrying out direct action against Israeli weapons factories in this country. So in that sense, it's not working. And I mean, I think the turnout, I wasn't entirely surprised the turnout was so big, but it was really heartening to see the turnout on Friday was so large, because this is not the center of London either, right? This is Woolwich in East London. So, it's a bit of a schlep to get out there for people like myself who live in North London. But it's not, like, the point is that we've had almost 3 years now of these kind of mass mobilizations in central London, which are great in some ways, because you can kind of see the power of the movement. But some critics of those demonstrations say that they're kind of, after nearly 3 years of genocide, some people say that it's time for different strategies, and almost that those can be a bit, I don't know, almost neutralizing, in the sense that, like, you will get there, you listen to some speeches and you go home, whereas taking direct action, although it's not for everyone, it has concrete consequences, and there is ways that everyone can support it in different ways, right? In different kind of fora, as you mentioned, the Defend Our Jury sign holders, and there's all kinds of different support roles in that people carry out. So yeah, just talk about that if you'd like.
So I think both are important. The court mobilizations are important because the fight is not just against the factory, but also against the legal system in this country. And the battle continues in court, where weapons companies continue to be exposed through documents. But it's also, court mobilizations are particularly important in the Filton 24 case because this 25, sorry, because this has been the test case for justifying prescription and for applying a terrorism connection, which they've now set a precedent for. But taking action is also incredibly effective, and it is something that anyone can do, really.
When you were in prison and you were in court and in the dock, how did it feel to have those kind of mobilizations outside court?
Yeah, it was incredible because you could occasionally actually hear it in the courtroom, and to know that the jury could see the public support for our case was always very reassuring.
And I was, when I was watching the judge read out his sentencing remarks on Friday, I was watching the live stream in one ear and then, you know, covering the protests at the same time. And in my ear of the live stream of the judge reading out his remarks, I could hear the chants in the courtroom. So clearly in the courtroom they were hearing it, and it, you know, it has an impact in that way. So let's talk about the Court of Appeal ruling, which took place on Monday. In that ruling that went against Palestine Action, Judge Carr claimed that Palestine Action is not a non-violent direct action group like the suffragettes. She said, she made the contrast. But I mean, this British judges are supposed to be these, you know, educated, erudite, people who are supposed to know history, and clearly this was historically illiterate. You know, the fact is that the suffragettes in their campaign for Vote for Women were often fairly violent. Like, unlike Palestine Action, you know, they even carried out bombings and arson attacks on their targets, something Palestine Action has never done. So do you think this kind of historical illiteracy that we saw in this ruling is going to make it easier to appeal? And generally, what are your thoughts on the prospects of this ban being overturned in the court system?
Yeah, I mean, they whipped Winston Churchill. I only found that out recently. They were absolutely not a non-violent organization, nor were they out in the open, which the judges also suggested. They were secretive. You kind of have to be to bomb buildings. Comparing the two, Palestine Action, no one who's taken action with Palestine Action has ever been convicted of intentional violence. We've only seen Sam, who was convicted of GBH without intent. And throughout 2 trials, the rest of us, well, all of us were acquitted of aggravated burglary and violent disorder. It's, I mean, of course, it's not factual. Of course, they're having to rewrite history. Because that's the only way you can justify this. And I think that's exactly why we saw this decision on... Sorry.
It's okay.
I think it's telling that this decision came out on Monday, just a handful of days after my co-defendants were sentenced as terrorists. Because the last prescription hearing happened after we were acquitted, and you kind of see a pattern where there was no kind of public justification in the last hearing, and so the court decided to overturn what the government had done. But now that there is terrorism convictions, they've allowed it to happen, and they haven't allowed it to happen in any real basis in law, because if you listen to the judgment, a lot of what the judge was referencing was violence, which is not actually the basis that prescription happened on. The argument is purely on criminal damage. But they have to justify it to the public somehow, and so they do that by lying about violence and rewriting history. But in terms of success of appeal, the courts in this country are incredibly corrupt, incredibly pro-Israel. That's why my trial was able to happen the way it did. That's why we've seen what we've seen with prescription happen. So it's not it's not a surprise. I mean, it's the same court system that allows the export of weapons to Israel. I do believe it will win. It will definitely win in the European Court of Human Rights. But this injustice, thanks to the state, is being allowed to continue for far longer than it ever should have. And the people who are suffering as a result of this ultimately are the Palestinians.
Absolutely. Well, we thank you very much for your time, Zoe. Is there any other final message you'd like to send out today?
Just don't be intimidated by the government. They're doing everything they can because they can see that everyone who stands with Palestine is right, and we are on the right side of history. So don't be afraid to do what you can to stand up for the Palestinian people and for the rights of everyone in this country as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Zoë Rogers. You are a former Palestine Action political prisoner, and you were acquitted as the first 6 of the Filton 25 to stand trial. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
She's extraordinary. So, we talk about bravery and courage, but this is just someone doing what she believes is right. It has, it's not an exceptional action,
and these are all ordinary people, they're all people from all works of life, many young people, working class people who have jobs, and have actually sacrificed a lot. They don't like to talk about it, but I know from speaking to many of them that they've actually sacrificed a lot in their personal lives, been through very, very harsh treatment in prison, actually. It is incredible.
It just goes to show, what she said, don't be intimidated, is so important, because all of these pro-Israel, pro-genocide governments want people to be scared, and they want people to think they're powerless. But the British state would not be deploying all of these resources against people like Zoë if they weren't a threat to the genocide industrial complex. So just incredible gratitude to Zoë and all the other Palestine actionists. It's illegal to say in the UK that you support Palestine Action, but in every repressive regime, the government can't get at what's in people's hearts and what's in their minds. So there's probably many, many people across the UK who do support Palestine Action, but won't say it out loud because of the fear of arrest and repression by the Labour government, which has just been so. Well, of course, we have to remember that the Labour Party was the party in power during the Nakba. It was the Labour Party. Of course, absolutely, Zionism is bipartisan, but the Labour Party presided over the Nakba, the expulsion of the Palestinians, and the Labour Party is presiding over and assisting this.
The Labour Party called for the Nakba to happen in 1945 before it even happened. Before they were, when they were just coming into government. It was. I mean, they were really the originators of it, of the Zionist takeover of Palestine in many ways.
And whitewashing it with socialism.
Right. And progressivism. Thank you. Thank you, Asa, for that. And I know you'll be following whatever happens next in the Palestine Action legal cases.
Well, as Ali mentioned, it would be incredibly illegal for me to say that I support Palestine Action, but nonetheless, I will be following it closely.
Amazing. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to turn to what's happening with this memorandum of understanding between the U.S. and Iran. So let's just get into it, Ali, and then we'll bring on Jon for the resistance report. So you're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman here with my colleague, Ali Abunimah. On February 28th, the United States and Israel launched a war of aggression against Iran with maximalist goals: topple Iran's system of government, eliminate or neutralize its nuclear program, sever Iran from the axis of resistance, and isolate Hezbollah, Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, and Palestine, especially Gaza, from Tehran and force unconditional surrender. None of that has happened. After days of speculation about the content of the agreement, a U.S. official on Wednesday read out the text of the US-Iran Memorandum of Understanding that is due to be signed in Switzerland on June 19th. But Trump and Iranian leaders have actually signed it separately already. This video shows Trump signing it in Versailles on Wednesday. It declares an end to the war on all fronts, including Lebanon. Far from surrendering, the 14-point memorandum amounts to a stunning victory for Iran. We'll talk more about what it does and does not say, but some things are immediately apparent. Iran gave up on none of its red lines. Its missile deterrent is intact and is not a subject of discussion and negotiations. Its enriched uranium will not be removed from the country, and it will retain the right to have a nuclear program. Its alliances with Hezbollah and the axis of resistance have not been severed and are also not up for discussion or negotiation. By contrast, the United States commits itself to massive concessions, lifting its naval blockade, withdrawing forces from Iran's proximity after a final deal, issuing immediate oil and financial waivers, making frozen funds immediately available, creating a $300 billion reconstruction and development mechanism, and committing to the termination of all sanctions, including UN, International Atomic Energy Agency, and unilateral US sanctions. Iran will maintain long-term management over the Strait of Hormuz, potentially in partnership with Oman and other regional states, but the situation will not go back to how it was before the war. The agreement reflects on the real balance of power produced by the failed US-Israeli aggression. Trump can threaten to resume bombing, as he has, but the text confirms that Washington desperately needed a deal to reopen the Strait of Hormuz and resume the global energy flow, and it was prepared to pay a very high price to get it. Iran, meanwhile, retains its leverage, whether the deal succeeds or fails. Let's take a closer look at some of the issues now. Ali, earlier this week, we were dealing with leaks, disputed drafts, and competing interpretations of the MOU. Now a senior U.S. official has read out a 14-point text that gives us a much clearer picture of what's going on. Ali, what does this document actually show?
Hi, Nora. Yes, well, the headline is simple. Iran won the war. And I think Trump was too historically illiterate to understand the symbolism of him signing this surrender at Versailles. Of course, that's where Germany and the powers defeated in World War I were forced to sign a humiliating treaty that after they lost the war. And that's exactly what Donald Trump did. But that does not mean that this memorandum of understanding doesn't carry risks or that implementation will be straightforward. Far from it. This MOU is only an interim agreement, and although it contains important U.S. concessions and principles, it sets up a 60-day period for negotiation on a final agreement. And that interim period can be extended, and nobody thinks reaching a final agreement will be easy. And of course, Iran is not going into this trusting the United States. They know very well that the United States does not stick to its commitments and its treaties. So they're not relying on trust or goodwill. And the elephant in the room is Israel, which is very unhappy with the inclusion of Lebanon. And we can expect that Israel and its lobby and their allies within the administration will do all they can to sabotage the deal. And just to give you a taste of the reaction in Israel, look at this headline from the Times of Israel. This is an article by its editor, David Horowitz. Trump's deal is a catastrophic capitulation to Iran's aggressors, leaves Israel vulnerable and constrained. And Horowitz writes, the deal manifestly empowers and finances a mass murdering regime. It elevates the Islamic Republic to a regional powerhouse. It abandons the Iranian people to whom Trump promised that help is on the way. And it directly endangers and constrains Israel with terminology that binds Israel to a ceasefire it had no part in negotiating. Very angry and frustrated words there from someone who is not even on the furthest right in Israeli terms. And here's the headline from the New York Times today. Israel, stunned by Trump's Iran deal, sees it as a catastrophic capitulation. And this article starts with these sentences. Israel awoke to a frightening new reality on Thursday as it absorbed with disbelief and largely in silence the terms of President Trump's preliminary agreement to end the war with Iran. It accomplishes none of Israel's war aims, analysts and officials said, and arguably leaves the country in worse shape on each of them. So, Israel very unhappy and not wanting to voice its criticism too loudly. But yesterday, Benjamin Netanyahu posted this photo on Twitter X of him in a meeting with the caption, in a working meeting with the head of the Mossad. And I think that can be read as a not so subtle mafia-like message that Israel is not going to take this lying down.
Incredible. Let's go through what the MOU actually says. You've read it. You've read all the various interpretations of it. But what does it actually say?
Yeah, I'll go through all the key points. First, the parties declare an immediate and permanent end to war and military operations on all fronts, including Lebanon. The text says they will refrain from the threat or use of force against one another and will uphold the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the parties and their allies, and also will not interfere in each other's internal affairs. So if the US sticks to that, that means no regime change. Second, there is a 60-day period for negotiations towards a final agreement. And third, the United States must immediately begin lifting its naval blockade against Iran, which, according to Vice President J.D. Vance, has already happened, including restrictions on Iranian ships, ports, and related maritime activity. And that has to be done within 30 days. The U.S. will also immediately unfreeze billions of dollars of Iranian assets, some of which have been frozen for decades. And remember that for years, Donald Trump has viciously mocked and attacked Barack Obama for unfreezing a much smaller amount of Iranian assets in the context of the 2015 JCPOA nuclear deal, which Trump tore up in 2018. But listen to Trump just yesterday justifying the unfreezing of assets now.
Freezing US dollars.
Well, the unfreezing, that's an easy one to answer. We have taken a lot of their money, and we have their money. We have taken their money. It's not our money, it's their money. And we froze it. At a certain point in time, I guess we're going to have to give it back. You know, if we didn't give it back, nobody would ever invest in the dollar again.
Yeah, we have to give it back.
Saying the quiet part out loud, as always.
Right. So, and then my fourth point, Iran restores safe maritime passage through the Strait of Hormuz within 30 days. And then in the long term, the agreement confirms that Iran will continue to administer the strait, albeit in partnership with Oman and possibly other Gulf coastal states. Fifth, after a final agreement, and this is really huge, the United States must withdraw its forces from Iran's proximity within 30 days of a final agreement. What that exactly means remains to be seen, but this is a major concession, and it would mark a major retreat for the U.S. empire and a recognition by the U.S. of Iran's security needs, something it has never been willing to do before. We've all seen that meme, the map of Iran surrounded by U.S. bases saying, you know, why did Iran place its country so close to our bases? So finally, recognition for the reality. Six, as you mentioned, Nora, that $300 billion economic reconstruction fund. Basically, we can interpret this to mean that the Gulf states are going to pay for Iran's reconstruction. Seventh, as you said, also the US undertakes to terminate all types of sanctions against Iran, including UN, International Atomic Energy Agency, and US unilateral primary and secondary sanctions on an agreed schedule in the final deal. Eighth, Iran reaffirms that it will not procure or develop nuclear weapons. Trump can claim this as a major win, but it isn't, because this is exactly what Iran agreed to in the 2015 nuclear agreement, which, again, Trump is the one who tore up. And it has been Iran's long-standing position that we don't want nuclear weapons and we're not developing them. Also, the issue of Iran's enriched uranium is to be resolved, according to the agreement, by downblending it inside Iran under IAEA supervision, not by handing it to the United States. You remember Trump saying so many times in the past few months, the dust, they're going to give us the dust, the big, beautiful dust. They're not going to hand the dust, the uranium, over to the United States. And then, as you mentioned, also immediate waivers on Iranian crude oil and petroleum product exports, and lifting any restrictions on related banking, insurance, and transportation services. But that is to continue until all sanctions are lifted. This means that Iran will immediately be able to start earning billions of dollars from oil exports. And then, as we said, the unfreezing of Iranian funds. And finally, the deal, once a final deal is reached, this is to be endorsed by a UN Security Council resolution. And I suppose that Iran insisted on that to give it some international standing and legal force, although they're not relying on that. They're relying, as we'll mention later, on their own military to ensure implementation.
Walk us through why Trump would agree to make these really significant concessions, signing essentially a surrender treaty at Versailles here.
Well, the answer is he had no choice, and that's what we've been saying for many months, and other analysts have been saying too. The Strait of Hormuz is the artery of the global energy economy, and as we've said before, time was running out, and time was not on the US side. Here is Trump explaining it in his own words at a press conference, and this is the same press conference we showed a clip of earlier, and it was at the G7 meeting in France on Wednesday.
Bad press, I know that. Now, if I did the opposite, if I went out and continued to bomb them for another 4, just bomb the hell out of them, I'd get bad press on that. No, there's nothing I can do. But what this does is it allows the ships to go. If we keep bombing, those ships won't be going. And you're talking about $500, $600, $700 million a day. It's a lot of money, a lot of money. That's why the world is okay. It's liquid, it's fine. Also, we run out of reserves in about 4 weeks. There are reserves all over the world, and we would really run out.
Yeah, I mean, it really was checkmate in Iran's favor.
Yeah, and I just have to comment on, because when I was listening to this yesterday, I didn't pay attention to how shifty and uncomfortable Marco Rubio looked standing behind him. So I just want to mention that. And something else Trump added, he said you could drive somebody into the ground. He means by bombing them. Mm-hmm. And a lot of bad things happen, but the strait would never be open. Right. And that recognition of reality by Trump is very significant. So Trump himself understands that bombing Iran would not open the strait, and the world economy was weeks from heading over the cliff. And he actually said that the alternative to this deal would be, his words, a worldwide depression. So checkmate, as you said, Nora.
Yeah.
And and then basically, in either case, if the deal fails or succeeds, Iran still retains its leverage over the Strait of Hormuz. That's why it's in such a strong position.
Yeah. Let's talk about Lebanon. Hezbollah joined the war the day after the Israeli-American surprise attack of February 28th, and it's still been fighting fiercely against Israeli occupation forces, as we've been seeing week after week, and as John will show us in a few minutes as well. Iran made a ceasefire a condition of negotiations and an agreement, and Lebanon is explicitly included in the agreement. But is it clear what exactly the terms are regarding Lebanon, and and when Israel is supposed to stop its massacres?
Yeah, well, they haven't stopped. Even today, there are reports of fighting in Lebanon, and we'll be hearing from John soon. But there are field reports today that Hezbollah is confronting Israeli attempts to advance in various parts of southern Lebanon. And Lebanon is the key test and probably the most likely reason this agreement and process could fall apart. The text says the parties and their allies declare an immediate and permanent end to the war and military operations on all fronts, including Lebanon, and uphold sovereignty and territorial integrity. Now, that may be open to interpretation. Iran's position is that this means that Israel must stop attacking Lebanon and withdraw from Lebanese territory. Iran's position is that this agreement binds the US and Israel as parties to the war on one side, and Iran and Hezbollah as parties to the war on the other side. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has said explicitly in recent days that any Israeli attack on Lebanon or continued Israeli occupation of Lebanese territory violates the Memorandum of Understanding. Hezbollah's position is similar. It says Iran made Lebanon a first and fundamental clause of the agreement, and it says that Iran has assured Hezbollah that Israeli withdrawal will be demanded in the next phase. So ceasefire now, withdrawal later, but a priority.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. position is a bit more slippery. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance has said Lebanon is included in, quote, a true regional peace deal. But U.S. officials in Israel are trying to avoid the obvious implication that Israel must stop attacking now and withdraw. So this is where it can all break apart. If Israel keeps bombing Lebanon, Iran will say the agreement has been violated. If Israel refuses to withdraw, the war hasn't ended. And if the U.S. cannot or will not restrain Israel, then Washington will be showing basically that it cannot deliver its side of the deal, and Iran will therefore feel that it is not bound to uphold its side either.
That's right. And Trump has also been, mildly criticizing Israel over Lebanon. How should we read that?
Well, it's actually been a little bit more than mild, and he's made some extraordinary comments in the past 24 hours or so, probably more since we started the show. It's very hard to keep up with him. Especially during his trip to Europe for that G7 summit. And he made some comments while he was meeting with the Emir of Qatar in France when Trump has asked if he thinks the deal can survive if Israel keeps attacking Lebanon. Now, this clip is almost 2 minutes long, but it really, truly is worth watching. So let's watch it now.
What are the expectations for Israel? Can this deal survive if Israel attacks Lebanon?
It can, and I consider that the minor war. Iran's a big one, but we have that little pinprick out there that constantly rears its head, and that's Hezbollah. And I was very responsible for Syria, and the man that's running Syria now is a person that I put there along with President Erdogan and some others. He's done an amazing job of pulling it together. He's not a Boy Scout, but he's done an amazing job of pulling it together. And he is very good with Hezbollah, does not like them. And I'll tell you what, Israel's fighting Hezbollah too long, and too many people are being killed. And you don't have to knock down an apartment house every time you're looking for somebody, because there are a lot of people in those apartment houses, and they're not all Hezbollah, that I can tell you. And I suggested to Israel to let Syria take care of Hezbollah. Because to be honest with you, I think they do a better job of doing it.
Isn't that more important
And I didn't like Syria. I didn't like where 2 hours before we're signing the agreement that there was an attack in Lebanon, in Beirut. It was right in, it wasn't like in the southern side, and you know, it was in Beirut. I did not like that, not at all. But I think that Syria, you know, he's pulled that country together amazingly quickly. He's very capable, and he's been very good for me. He's protected everything that I've asked for. He's done, and if Israel can't do the job without killing everyone else, he'll do the job. Syria will do the job.
Where to begin?
I just sorry, one point. When he said that there was an attack on the Dahia on southern Beirut, he said Syria, but he meant by Israel. And he said, I didn't like it 2 hours before the agreement. But there is so much in there that is just off the wall. One thing to note is that video was actually posted on social media by an official White House account. This is what Trump wants Israel to hear. And his comments about using Syria, using the Al-Qaeda affiliated so-called government that he brags about installing along with Turkey as a proxy, you know, that's just horrifying. But maybe that's a different topic. But overall, this shows that he understands that Israel's aggression against Lebanon directly conflicts with the U.S. interest and the global economic interest in making this deal work. And he made similar comments at the G7 press conference, so he's sticking to that. This is shorter, but also worth listening. It's because it's just so amazing. So let's listen to this one too.
You'll see that when you see the agreement, but it's appropriate that we release the agreement. And we did send a copy to Israel, by the way. They've been a good partner. Again, I think they could do better with respect to Hezbollah. I'm not saying they shouldn't protect themselves. I'm saying when 2 drones are shot into the desert and drop harmlessly, you don't have to knock down buildings in Beirut. They could behave better. And frankly, they could do a better job. I love them as a partner. They were terrific. But they could do a much better job with Hezbollah. On that, I don't think they're doing well. And I feel very bad for Lebanon. Lebanon's been, you know, it was a great culture. It was a great, they had the professors, the doctors, the lawyers. It was an incredible culture, maybe the highest in the Middle East for years and years, centuries. And for the last 50, 60 years, they have been just trashed. They have been living in hell.
By whom? Right. All right. Tell us about that clip. I mean, again, you know, he's releasing these comments publicly. He wants Israel to know that he's, you know, somewhat disappointed in how it's, you know, but he reiterates his love for Israel. Israel is a great partner. They're just kind of, you know, they're a little heavy-handed sometimes, kind of thing. How do you see that?
Well, this is a warning to Israel. It will have to be backed up by action, because we know that Israel, if it's not paying a price, it's not going to react. But another clear sign of the U.S. anger towards Israel, I think this is a real, you know, a real conflict of interest between the U.S. and Israel, were the comments from Vice President J.D. Vance today, where he actually excoriated Israeli critics of the agreement, and he warned, you know, he said, quote, "I might not be attacking the only powerful ally that I have anywhere left in the entire world." So J.D. Vance pointing to how isolated Israel is a very different message from what we would have heard from a Joe Biden telling us how loved Israel is all over the world. And then speaking at the White House today, Vance said that Trump was, quote, "the only head of state in the entire world who is sympathetic to the nation of Israel at this moment in time." And according to this report from Al Jazeera English, he chastised Israeli cabinet members that the majority of the Jewish state's defensive weapons were provided through U.S. funding. So there is an implicit threat.
Yep.
And Vance says, quote, "The problem for Israel is not Donald J. Trump and anybody in Israel who thinks their biggest problem is the president of the United States needs to wake up and smell the reality of the situation that country is in." You wouldn't have heard that from Kamala Harris.
I was just going to say. Incredible. So they're recognizing, the hole that Israel has put, not just its allies and partners, but the entire region and the entire world.
Yeah, because Israel promised Trump. We had those insider accounts from the Situation Room of how Trump bought Netanyahu's promises of quick victory, of regime change. Of course, Trump believed them. It was his decision. I'm not blaming Israel for that. Trump is responsible. But, another of Iran's major achievements from this war is driving this huge wedge between Israel and the United States. And there's going to be a major battle over that domestically in the United States and between US and Israeli elites. But this fracture is real. However, the question is whether Trump is going to enforce his words, and the only action that will restrain Israel is cutting off weapon supplies and aid, and we haven't seen it yet. But I do think we should have no doubt that Iran is going to hold the US to this. They're not just going to allow Israel to keep attacking Lebanon. And we'll talk about Gaza in a bit. Mohammad Baqir Ghalibaf, the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, and its key negotiation said that, just last week, Iran was preparing to fire missiles at Israel in retaliation for that attack on southern Beirut that Trump mentioned. And that is what prompted the United States to finally make the concessions needed to get to a deal. And even today, Dr. Mohammad Marandi said that Iran was even preparing to fire missiles last night in the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐿 control room of the IRGC put out a warning last night. And then apparently the Americans must have begged them to back off. But as Dropsite News reported, Ghalibaf said Iran issued an ultimatum to the United States following that strike on southern Beirut, saying that Washington was warned that Iran would respond unless its demand were met. And Ghalibaf said that Lebanon is an integral part of the axis of resistance, and that any ceasefire agreement must apply across all fronts, particularly Lebanon. And he was effusive in his thanks towards Hezbollah and the Lebanese Shiite community for supporting Iran during the war. So it's inconceivable that Iran is going to back away from that commitment.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, let's talk about Gaza. The agreement says that the war ends on all fronts, including Lebanon, but it does not explicitly mention Gaza specifically. What does this mean for Gaza?
Well, this is something a lot of people are asking and wondering about, and I even see in the comments as we're speaking, people are raising this issue. And frankly, people worry about it, and some fear that it might mean that Iran's commitment to Palestine is somehow less or weaker. Now, Rania Khalek of Breakthrough News put this question to University of Tehran Professor Mohammad Marandi yesterday. Of course, Dr. Marandi is a previous guest of ours as well, and I think it's worth listening to his answer, and then I'll say more about it. Let's listen to Dr. Marandi.
Well, I guess, but what I guess the question maybe I should have phrased this differently. I guess the question I've seen people asking is the way that Iran is saying Israeli withdrawal, no more attacks on Lebanon. Why aren't they demanding the same thing for Gaza in this agreement with the U.S.? That's the question I've seen people raising.
Okay, well that's a different issue, but that is also a problem for a couple of reasons. One is that right now we're talking, Lebanon is under assault and there's no ceasefire. And so the war which is taking place is between the United States and the Israeli regime, Iran and Lebanon. Mm-hmm. And so Iran is saying, whatever, if there's a ceasefire with us, it's with Lebanon. If there's a withdrawal of forces, it's in Lebanon too. We are one and the same. So that's with regards to the current war. But Iran has also said that the Israeli regime has to end the slaughter in Gaza, and that will be discussed at the negotiations. Now, the problem, Gaza and Palestine will be a part of the negotiations, but the problem, Rania, is that regional countries went to Egypt and endorsed Trump's fake ceasefire and helped impose it on the Palestinian people. You know, all of them, Abdullah, Sisi, Aliyev, Erdogan, from the Persian Gulf, from Pakistan. So it is difficult for Iran to impose, to push very hard, because they'll say they already have a ceasefire. So what Iran will try to do at the time being is to say, okay, then force the Israelis back to the yellow line and stop the killing. That's because they have a ceasefire. Iran can't say, no, we reject this this ceasefire where tens of heads of state were there and they all endorse it. You have to do what it was. It's not going to work. But Iran.
So it's a matter of like the bureaucracy of this fake ceasefire that's already in Gaza.
Well, according to Dr. Marandi, it's about Iran not wanting to appear to step on the toes of those other countries that have sort of taken ownership of that issue. But here's also what Dr. Marandi said this morning on Judge Napolitano's show. He said, quote, "During the negotiations over the next few weeks, the issue of Gaza is going to be part of it. Iran is not going to accept Netanyahu continuing to slaughter Gazans every day. So the issue of Gaza, in order for us to have success, it has to be resolved." Now, Marandi insists always that he's not a government official, although he's very well connected. And of course, he's been a media advisor a few weeks ago or months ago when the Iranian delegation went to Islamabad for the talks. He was with them as a media spokesperson. And he has a very good record of being accurate. So he knows what Iranian leaders are thinking. And I don't think he would make a statement like that unless he knew what he was talking about. The bigger picture is that over the years, many have predicted and many have hoped that Iran would abandon its commitment to Palestine, but it has never done so. And it would really not make any sense for Iran to do so now. Moral considerations aside, given the deep commitment that Iran has had to Palestine since the revolution, it would be undermining its own position and its own gains and the gains of the axis of resistance if it was suddenly to abandon Palestine. And the primary reason Iran has been targeted by the US and Israel for decades is not the nuclear program, but its support for Palestinian resistance. So why would Iran at this moment, when it has its greatest strength and leverage, suddenly back away from Palestine? It really would not make sense. So I know how much I would love to see those words in the agreement, but these explanations do make sense to me, and I think people have to have some confidence that Iran's commitment and depth of commitment to the question of Palestine is not something that can be easily shaken or solved. Not at all. And I just want to also point out that Hamas welcomed the announced agreement and said that it hoped that it would help halt Israel's ongoing aggression against Palestinians in Gaza, as well as, of course, ending the attacks on Lebanon and other fronts. But there is also a danger. Yesterday, I think they're airing it on Friday, so I won't give too much away. But yesterday, I recorded an interview with one of the Iranian TV channels, and they asked me, I was surprised by the question, they asked me if I thought that Israel would take its anger out on the Palestinians over this agreement. And I think that danger is there, that if Israel feels strategically checked in Lebanon and Iran, it may intensify its violence against Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. It's already doing it, if it thinks it can act with impunity. So that will also be a real test for this deal in the long term. But overall, I still believe that any change in the regional balance of power to the detriment of Israel and the US empire, which this deal does reflect, ultimately helps the Palestinians and all people striving to be sovereign and free and exercise their absolute right to self-determination.
Thank you for that that breakdown. I think, yeah, I mean, I I've been hearing it, all the time. Both, why isn't Gaza explicitly included in the deal, and like now Israel is going to take out its aggression on Gaza, which they always do. And so thank you for addressing both of those points. And I guess it just remains to be seen how the US ultimately, how far they're willing to go to put a clamp on their junior partner.
Yeah, I just think it's untenable. It's inconceivable to have a situation where, Iran and the US have peace and Israel withdraws from Lebanon and Israel is still slaughtering people in Gaza. That is politically not tenable for Iran, internationally and domestically. And in Iran, there is a lot of criticism of the deal. Ghalibaf was on Iranian television yesterday talking about the deal in order to win over people who are saying, you made too many concessions. So the idea that Iran can simply give up these commitments, I don't think that's the case. And so it's always, we're trying to read between the lines, but I would say look at Iran's record over many decades and look at what's at stake and look at the fact that it does have a great deal of leverage now, more than ever. And that puts it in a much better position to support Palestinians than even before February 28th.
Yeah. Good point. Thank you so much, Ali. Thanks for watching all those videos that I know it's always, I mean, maybe it's a little more easier to
this
take.
Was honestly, there were some great moments in the last 24, 48 hours, and we need to take those where we can.
At least for comedic relief, if nothing else. Thanks, Ali. Let's bring Jon on. Hey, Jon.
I watched it.
You give him enough rope, as the saying goes.
Did he miss the whole Syria war? It's just
amazing,
something.
Isn't it? Amazing.
I had a
lot
lot more
in there.
I had a lot more to say about that, but I'll leave that for another day.
He has more faith in Jelani than he has in Pete Hegseth at this point, so that says something, right? Absolutely incredible.
But he did give him perfume.
Oh, well, that's right. I mean,
he always says he's not a Boy Scout too.
He's no Boy Scout. He just chopped a lot of heads off.
I remember that line from Lady Macbeth: all the perfumes in Arabia could not sweeten these little hands. Or all the perfumes in Washington cannot sweeten Jolani's hands.
He's just such a simple man.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Just,
that press conference, whenever you
incredible.
see 70 minutes on a Trump press conference, it's going one way or the other.
Yeah.
You know the line, if you're explaining, you're losing.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Minutes.
No gong to or a hook, to bring him off stage, just letting him talk. It's
I mean, they lost the war.
remarkable.
There's no question about it.
Yeah,
We
big
said
time.
that 2.5
Even what was it, Foreign Policy Magazine? I haven't read the entire article yet, but Foreign Policy Today just put out an article. Iran is a bigger defeat than Vietnam. So the major corporate press is also feeling this one. So we're gonna see how that pans out. Meanwhile, Jon, Hezbollah has not let up in its defense of Lebanon. What have you been noticing this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was an unusual week for sure. I think Hezbollah definitely stopped operations against the buffer zone in those first couple of days. They met advances. They were very particular to say that in their field reports, that if the Israelis advance, they're going to fight. But there's a lot, I think, to be determined about how this is all going to go. But the resistance is clear that they're fighting until the soldiers leave. So we'll see how that impacts these talks for the next 60 days. I think the concern is that's a lot of time for Israel to carry out its Beit Hanun policy and Bintish Baal. So there's a lot of concern about it, and but also a lot of hope that this is that Hezbollah's resistance, their inability to be defeated, has set this up. People said they were gone in 2024, right? And they proved everybody completely wrong, and have the territorial sovereignty of Lebanon really in their hands at this point.
All right, Ali, do the honors.
Take it away, John.
All right, so you are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I am Jon Elmer. This is the Resistance Report on day 986 of Israel's genocide in Gaza, day 109 of the battle in South Lebanon, and day 111 of the US-Israeli war on Iran. Memorandum of Understanding being signed last night was a bit of a surprise. It was supposed to happen tomorrow, but it has been signed. And just because things are moving quickly, I will remind you that I'm reporting this on Thursday, June the 18th. So let's take a look at Lebanon for this week. We will start with this map as usual. This week's operations are particularly concentrated on the right-hand side of this map, Yahmor up to Nabatea. Up on the highlands there, you can see the topography there, moving uphill towards Nabatea and getting the ridge line around Beaufort Castle, which is in Yahmor there, just north of Metula. That is the Galilee Panhandle that you see running up there. That is Israel below. Lebanon, as you can see in the inset, because we are always focused on South Lebanon, but you can see in the inset that this is only a small portion of Lebanon. And if we look at this next map, you'll see more of the country, but again, couldn't fit it all in. Long and skinny country, and short and square media box. So always takes some editing, but we are going to look at the first operation. If you look on the upper right of that map, thanks. On the upper right, you see the X, the red X up there. That is where this drone was down. So Israeli drones are all over Lebanon. You can see Beirut in the middle on the left there. It's in the Bekaa Valley that this operation was, near Baalbek. You can see Baalbek is pretty much directly across from Beirut. It's about 67 kilometers northeast of Beirut, and that's where this Heron drone was taken down. If you look down at the bottom of the map, you can see Tyre there on the coast, on the bottom of the map, and then you can also see the Galilee Panhandle, again cut out of that map. But if you look at the place where the Galilee Panhandle is, you can see how steep it's getting into the mountains of this stage of the battle. Obviously, all of South Lebanon are rolling hills into the Lebanon mountains. So I wanted to bring you a full sense of the scale of those mountains, which I think this map does. This map was made by Fabien Lazo, yeah, important to see the location where this drone was down. Now let's take a look at number 3. This is Heron, Israeli Heron 1 drone. This is their original flagship drone. This is the one they have sold all over the world to countries all over the world, using them for surveillance. This is the first time the Islamic resistance in Lebanon has downed one of these drones. There you see the missile that took it down. They blur the 358 missile. The resistance in Lebanon and in Yemen and in Iran have been using this missile to down drones. This is the drone killer that has taken down at least 50 US Reaper drones and a dozen or so Israeli drones. You can see it there, decapitating that drone at 23,000 feet. And one of the reasons why these drones are harder to reach is the man-portable systems that I'll show you coming up. They don't reach that high. You can see the plane headless here falling to the sky. The resistance is going to capture this vehicle. You'll see that in coming videos. But the 358 missile is showing you the different views here, the thermal imaging. They're all over this with multiple angles on this particular drone up in the Bekaa Valley near Baalbek. If we look at the next slide, you can see the missile that it is. I've talked about this a bunch of times because this is the missile that was taking down the Reapers in Yemen. So as soon as that war started after October 7th, immediately Yemen was taking down drones. And by the end of their battle with the US, they had downed more than 25 Reapers using this particular missile, which is a cross between a surface-to-air missile, a cruise missile, and a loitering drone. It has all of those parts in it. It's rocket boosted, it's launched, and then once up in the air, it loiters around in like a figure-8 pattern and waits for the target using thermal cameras, using cameras as well, optical, electro-optical targeting, and then ultimately a laser proximity fuse. So when the loitering drone, the 358 that you're looking at here, comes in proximity of the target vehicle, it explodes in an area kill of that drone, which is basically exactly what we saw on video there. Hezbollah video was a very sharp video of it. But again, to down it at 23,000 feet is impressive. If we take a look at the next slide, this missile had been around for 4 years before it was publicly shown. This is the first time it was publicly shown to Shoigu, to the Russians. This is the IRGC showing it off. But before that, in 2019, missile parts from this had been interdicted by the naval blockade in Yemen. And so the Americans had found the component parts that were being shipped to Yemen to build this missile, and it confounded them because they didn't know. They thought it was at first a cruise missile, then they thought it was a loitering drone, they thought it was a surface-to-air missile. It has parts of all of those things, and it really confounded the U.S. And during this time, 2019, up until what the photo you're looking at here is September 2023, the missile was taking down U.S. drones, but hadn't been acknowledged openly by the Iranians. So this is the first time, September 2023, that they show off the missile. And of course, that is a prescient date because October 7th was just a few weeks later. Yemen joined the war pretty much right away. They joined the war and expanded the war from Gaza into the Red Sea. And began taking down US MQ-9 Reaper drones with this missile. And up till now, the resistance, as you saw in the previous video, they blur the launch of this missile. And in Yemen, they did the same. They don't, they're using ambiguity. Everybody knows the missile exists, but they've been hiding the missile that is responsible for, like I said, something like, depending on how you want to count them, something like 60 kills in the last 2.5 years since the war in Gaza started. Let's take a look at the next slide. You can see Hezbollah put out an air defense video. There's a Hermes 450 and a Hermes 900. Those are the other, the Hermes 900 is maybe the other flagship drone. The reason the Heron is the flagship drone is because the one that they sold to all the other countries. But here you're seeing MISOG man-portable air defense systems used by ground forces. And we saw these earlier in the battle, launched at helicopters, and really they got rid of the use of helicopters in South Lebanon very early on by using these missiles and firing on them. And they use them against drones to chase the drones away. They don't always get them. The drones are higher than these, than the highest elevation of the man-portable systems. But there's the Heron that was downed. And it says, in defense of Lebanon and its skies. So there's the multiple different types of air defense systems and air defense operations. 27 times Hezbollah fired on Israeli drones and turned them back in the last 3 weeks, and one of that Heron was shot down. Let's take a look at number 7 and look at the maps of where we're going to see these resistance operations today. Again, if we start with your eyes in the bottom right-hand corner of that map, you're in Israel, you're in the Galilee Panhandle. If you go diagonally from the bottom right to the upper left, you'll see Zautar Asharkia. That is where most of the battle is happening. On the upper left corner of this map, if you go a little bit to the right, you see Yahmar there. That is where the Beaufort Castle is, right on the edge there where you can see the ridge line and obviously the high ground. And around it is the Litani River. That's the dark areas that you see on those cliff faces is the Litani River. So it's an area close to Israel, but it's north of the Litani River, and they made a big deal about that. And Israel's movements have been to push towards Nabatea, which is the largest city in central south Lebanon. Also, you can see onto the upper right-hand corner, you see Hiam. We're going to see some operations from there. And then down along the panhandle, Edessa, we're going to see operations from there as well on this show. But we are going to start by showing you, as I did last week, I just think it was useful for the audience to see what it is exactly that we are watching slam into all of these vehicles. Battery on the top, PG-7BL anti-tank warhead from an RPG in the middle there, and the fiber optic spool trailing out, allowing preventing the vehicle from being jammed and allowing really accurate directions from the pilot to the vehicle itself. So that is one of the builds, but as I've told you, those are component parts. And they can be set up in different ways. So if we look at 8B here, this showed up on a video yesterday about to hit a Namr troop carrier. And we see in this shadow one that we have a reverse of the order of the parts. We have the PG-7BL on the top, the anti-tank weapon on the top, the battery in the middle, and again, we're seeing spools. And I've said this on this program for the last 3 months. We're not sure what percentage of drones are fiber optic, but these obviously give us pretty good indication. Seeing this one here in the shadow, we're going to see another one later on in the program, also in the shadow, that was built this way. So there's flexibility, which matters for distance, for weight distribution, for the ability to fly, to have these weights balanced out. And so we can see the way the different component parts work on this. So I thought that might be interesting to show everybody before we watch 20 minutes of them slamming into various Israeli armored vehicles. Let's take a look at 8C. This is in Majd al-Zun. This is in the western sector. Israel has begun pushing into this area. This was a pocket that they did not control, but you can see they destroyed it with artillery shelling and airstrikes. But they have moved into this area since the Memorandum of Understanding. They moved in on the weekend into this area, and immediately Hezbollah attacked their advance. Here we're hitting a Namr troop carrier. There's where you see the shadow. 3 RPG operations, 3 anti-tank guided missile operations, 50 rocket and artillery ops, 2 FPV drones versus tanks, 7 FPVs, 2 FPVs versus troops, 7 versus tanks, and 1 FPV versus a D9 in the first 3 days of their move into Majd al-Zun. So this gives you a kind of an idea of how Hezbollah is going to handle this ceasefire period. If the Israelis advance, they're going to be met. We can look at number 9 here. They're going to be met and attacked, and that happened yesterday. Israeli troops were hit by 2 FPV drones outside of their tanks. 5 were wounded in 2 strikes, and then 8 other casualties yesterday in a IED that foot soldiers detonated that killed 1 and wounded 7 officers and soldiers, additional officers and soldiers. So 13 casualties yesterday alone. So the war certainly is not stopping in Lebanon, and Israel is not projecting any indication that they're even going to stop, let alone withdraw. So we have to see how that unfolds in the coming weeks. The soldiers on camera there getting chased down, and again, this is the kind of this operation is actually from early in June, but you can see an entire base full of options. This is Misgav Am. Entire base full of options, and already by the end of May, early June, they're skipping the tanks and going for the soldiers. We can look at number 10 here. This is in Odessa. Again, this was along the Galilee Panhandle. This is going to be an FPV drone strike against an IDF M109 self-propelled 155 howitzer, 155 millimeter artillery shells that rain hell down on civilians. These are tools that the Israelis use. Essentially looks like a tank with an artillery gun on it, and they use these all along the border of Gaza. Of course, rained them down in by the hundreds of thousands. And so the resistance is targeting this vehicle over all of the other vehicles, because this is the vehicle that's doing the most damage to civilians in South Lebanon. So that is a direct hit and a destruction of that M109. Let's look at number 11. We're going to chase more soldiers here. This is in 𝐓𝐡𝐞. Of course, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 is famous for its resistance, famous for its prison break at the May 2000 fleeing of Israeli soldiers, the humiliating defeat of the Israelis. The people of 𝐓𝐡𝐞 broke into the torture prison that Israel ran with its collaborator army. You can see the 2 vehicles on the road. This drone spots them dismounting, and they're heading into the house. There you see 1, 2, 3, 4 soldiers heading into the house. Drone comes around and catches this group of soldiers going into the house. On this day, the same day as this operation, the Israelis reported that 4 soldiers were wounded in an FPV strike. So we're probably looking at them there. That was on June 7th. Number 12, we're going to see a Humvee come around the corner here, see the drone. It's about dead center. He's going to slam on his brakes. You see the dust pile, and both sides of the Jeep, they're jumping out of the Humvee, and the anti-tank rocket hits the Humvee, which will explode the Humvee and put shrapnel all over that area. This is in 𝐓𝐡𝐞. And one more, 13, is also in 𝐓𝐡𝐞, targeting, this is just really smart targeting we've seen, targeting these M113 mobile, remotely operated tank bombs. The Israelis use these remotely operated to bring explosives into Lebanon to blow up the house that's probably right in front of it there. And also the vehicles themselves blow up. We covered that extensively in Gaza, where they were used by the scores, if not hundreds, using these APCs that can no longer withstand the modern battlefield. But Israel has thousands of them that were given to them by the Americans in the 70s. And so they adapted them, made them remotely operated, and used them as essentially massive car bombs, except they're tanks, and they make unbelievable destruction, criminal car bomb by the American-funded Israeli military. Let's take a look at 14. It's going to focus just in on the area. The X on the right is Beaufort Castle. These next operations are going to cover the area from Yahmor that you see down on the bottom right of the map. Again, you see the topography. This is a NASA map of the topography of Lebanon, and really gives you an idea. It really backs what we see on all of these videos of the camera on board shooting the beauty of South Lebanon, but also how difficult an area it is to fight for both sides, but of course the advantage is on the indigenous guerrillas who know the area. And this is where they have put up a stiff fight in 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 and 𝐓𝐡𝐞 near Beaufort Castle, because the Israelis are pushing up to Nabatea, which is up on the top of that map. So that's where these operations will go. Let's start at 15. The Hezbollah drone here is going to chase down a group of soldiers, 4 dismounted IDF soldiers. This operation was on June the 2nd. All of the videos that I show you every week were published in the week between when you saw me last. So these are all new videos. Everything is new. And none of the videos are edited inside the videos. This is how Hezbollah presents these videos. So there's these soldiers running in various, would be better if they ran in various different directions. They all go in the same directions. And the IDF admitted that day that an FPV drone strike wounded 4 soldiers on that day. So that appears to be what we're looking at there. 16, we can look at targeting of a Humvee also in 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜. This is one of 24 Humvees destroyed in the last 3 weeks. And this week was really only a half week compared to the tempo of previous operations of previous weeks. Destroying there that Humvee. Let's take a look at 17. This is a D9, and there was only 4 D9s in the last 3 weeks, because as I reported last week, the IDF has admitted to a drastic reduction in engineering vehicles. These vehicles were being destroyed. They were too easy to destroy, and so as a result, dramatically curtailing the engineering operations of the Israelis in South Lebanon, which is the destruction. It's the destruction of family homes that Israel is doing because it cannot defeat Hezbollah militarily. Let's look at number 18. This is also 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜. You can see the landscape of these towns, and each and every one of these drones is collecting intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and targeting acquisition information for the future of this battle should Israel remain in the buffer zone. Where they are in the buffer zone is so well known to Hezbollah at this point. There's the direct strike on the Namr troop carrier there. And as I said yesterday, outside of a Namr troop carrier, 5 soldiers were wounded, 2 FPV strikes. Let's take a look at number 18. You're going to see on the wall there the shadow of the drone. Also, there it is there. You can see it flying around the house that's been destroyed by shelling. That's what shelling does to a house compared to airstrikes. The shells are murderous in Gaza, in a tight space of Gaza. But you can tell the difference between the shell and the aerial bombs. This is against another Namr there. He spots it after a tour of the village, after logging a reconnaissance mission. It's all valuable information even before that strike on the Namr there in 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜. Let's take a look at number 19. This is in 𝐓𝐡𝐞 now. This is near Beaufort Castle. You can look around the surroundings and see the castle. This is a mobile communications shelter. It's an 𝐓𝐡𝐞 shelter. We reported on this earlier because they've been targeted before. It's a mobile communications and command hub. And as soon as it was placed, it was hit. This is FPV number 2 flying over. And look in the bottom left, you can see the burning from FPV 1's work. And that's the destruction. You can see the Israelis running away from that site there that they had in their mobile communications station. So it is burnt, completely destroyed. You can see that. This is 20 minutes later. So the whole cabinet has been destroyed. But this vehicle is going, the second drone, that's what it's showing you there, that it completely destroyed it. A lot of people ask for battle damage assessments, even though we show battle damage assessments every single week. they completely destroy an anti-tank weapon against a vehicle or a shelter like that, completely destroys it. So here he's going to hit the 𝐓𝐡𝐞, and that is the logistics vehicle that brought the cabinet. So they drop off the cabinet. You can see it's got an unloader on the back. It drops off the cabinet for this advanced position, this forward operating base that the Israelis will use. And so Hezbollah targeted the cabinet, the shelter, and then targeted the truck that brought it. And as I've said, targeting these 𝐓𝐡𝐞s is very significant. And the number of them, Hezbollah has realized this significance for sure, because in the last 3 weeks, they have targeted 19 of these 𝐓𝐡𝐞s. And these logistical vehicles support the entire operation. So these are high quality hits, even though people like to see the tanks. It's these vehicles that make the operations in the south more and more difficult. Let's look at number 20, also in Yahmar. This is right around Beaufort Castle. Another Namur troop carrier. And we know that they penetrate the Namur troop carrier. You can see this one has gotten, has put up tactical netting over the rear door, which is its weakest point, and it looks like the drone hits that, whether it detonates it and gives it time for the shape charge to form, which I believe it does, because as soon as there's contact with the RPG fuse, it sends out the shape charge, which would just tear through that netting. So that is number 20. Let's look at 21. This is an 𝐓𝐿. So again, out of this entire base full of tanks, look at, there's dozens of them. They find the 𝐓𝐿 command vehicle. So this is a tank where the commanders operate out of, and they've got netting all over it, but not on the back, and it gets hit and destroyed. Very finite number of these command vehicles. They're built on Merkava 2 hulls. And then they're just full of command and communications gear. So high quality strikes all through this week's report. We could look at another Humvee 22. The destruction of the village. Each week that we show this, the destruction is worse in these villages, and Israel is promising to erase these villages. The resistance is promising to not stop fighting until the last Israeli soldier is out of Lebanese territory. And they have been very clear about that. In this first week, they have not waited to see if the Israelis would stop. It's clear the Israelis have not stopped. The IRGC recorded 84 ceasefire violations in the first 48 hours. So Hezbollah has carried on its operations. Look at 23, also near Beaufort Castle, which you can see in this land where the Israelis are attempting to take this ground so that they can move to the next high ground and push on Nabatea. That is roughly their plan, and where the base of the operations has been over the past 7 days since you last saw me, although many of these videos are from the previous week. That's the way Hezbollah publishes them, usually a week lag. But like I said, everything is new. And that's a turret gap, so that's an excellent place to strike from the resistance perspective on those tanks. A poor place to strike from the Israeli perspective. Let's look at 24. You can see Beaufort Castle there up at the top of the hill. And this is an operation against another tank. FPV drone strikes in the last 3 weeks. This week, 34. Last week, 37. The week before, 37. 24. 30 of them have been against tanks. So this is one of the 30 anti-tank operations using the FPV drones. So it's not like they've stopped hitting the tanks. And we know that at least we know, we haven't seen from the tank. We saw one tank burning from an open hatch, multiple from an open hatch. And we saw one that was struck in the back door burning. But we know that the Namurs, which are the same hull and chassis as the Merkava, we know at least 2 of those have been penetrated by the PG-7VL. They work on these tanks. 25? Is that 25? There's Beaufort Castle again in the left there. The Israelis are not appearing to hold the castle. Hezbollah did not defend the castle in the immediate in the final Israeli push on the castle. It's a symbolic place. It's not of significant military value in the grand scheme of the battle in South Lebanon. Here against the reverse, against the rear door of that tank, maybe looks like it hits the track that you can see there on that one. And 26, this is over on the coast now. This is Bayada. This is where the Israelis have pulled up stakes, but the other day they brought in a command vehicle here. You'll see a Hummer underneath netted camouflage tactical shelter, and Hezbollah finds it as soon as they got there. But you can see otherwise the town is has been abandoned. These are the bases that Israel has abandoned and the vehicles that they have pulled out. One more, 27 against a Namur troop carrier in Ainata. This is along the Galilee Panhandle. And number of operations against Namurs, there was 14 in the last 3 weeks. And against troops, there has been 25 in the last 3 weeks against troops. So tanks and troops, similar, Humvees and logistical vehicles at the same pace as tanks and troops. So really seeing the spread of these operations to high quality operations, quality over quantity with the FPVs. And let's take a look at this 28, because after all of these drone strikes, Hezbollah put out this PSYOP for the Israelis that pokes fun at Israel's pager operation in September 2024, which Israel is just so proud of, and Trump was so proud of too. And Netanyahu gave Trump a golden one of these pagers that Hezbollah, when they got the page from them, they had to use 2 fingers to turn off the page when they got it, and that was what detonated the pagers. And so Hezbollah, as a response to this, is to say no need to press, because these drones, you don't need to press these drones before they blow up in your face. So a little bit of Hezbollah PSYOP on the pager ops, because of course the pager op was when the world said, oh, Hezbollah's been defeated, and 1,500 or 2,000 pagers blew up in mid-level Hezbollah and Hezbollah fighters and children who picked it up, and Israel was just so proud of this indiscriminate terror attack. So Hezbollah pushing back on this, and we know that I've shown you lots of times over the last few months, fighters with missing fingers still on the battlefield. It didn't, whatever Israel thought that was going to do to Hezbollah's ability to resist in South Lebanon, they were wrong about that as well. Let's look at 29, because it's not just FPV drones. I try to show this every week. This is Syed 107 drones. These are constantly being fired, and they're being fired at a rate. This week, there was more one-way attack drone operations, and as you'll see on this video, they're going to launch 2 or 3 on this video. They're always swarms, usually always swarms, so multiple in each operation, but separate operations. This week there was 35 separate one-way attack drone operations. The drones you're seeing here be launched. The previous 2 weeks there was 75 others, so more than 100 in the past 3 weeks of these operations. More than FPV drone strikes, and less than rocket operations, which we'll get to after this one. But this is a good view of what the fighters are up to in the field. We don't get a lot of seeing them in the field. We have up late, but this next video is actually the incoming. So we're going to have audio in this one, and you're going to hear an explosion around 12 seconds into this. So just be prepared, dear listeners. Number 30. You can see that there's the same drone that was launched. This is Israeli footage showing the drone coming down on a base in Shlomi.
Boom.
So that's targeting a military base in Shlomi. And interestingly enough, this was the drone strike that Trump was saying in Ali's report. And if you didn't see Ali's report on the Iran memorandum of understanding, you should listen to it. It was excellent. But this is what Trump was talking about when he says, when 2 drones fall in the desert and don't do anything, you don't need to strike Beirut. Well, Israel used this as an excuse to strike Beirut, to escalate the conflict and to try to subvert the peace, the ceasefire agreement, the memorandum of understanding that the Iranians and the Americans were close to signing. But this is not inside Israel. This is in a military base on the border. And then this is what Israel responded by bombing Beirut. And then the Iranians were geared up to respond to that hit on Beirut, and Trump called them off. And Trump called them off and added concessions. The Iranians added concessions onto the MOU based on the fact that they weren't able to respond to that, and made an even more favorable deal. So you can see from those direct strikes the effectiveness of the one-way attack drone. And now just for this last video, I want to show you this legendary truck operation. Again, I've shown you a few of these, and they never get old. These fighters pulling off the cover, the camouflage on their Fajr rockets. These are Fajr 3 rockets, 90-kilo warheads. Half of that is high explosives. You can see the fighters here adding the fuses to the end. And now they're going to back this truck out. And you're going to wonder, what does the cab of this truck look like? And it looks like that. And it still works. You see him pulling off his 3-point turn there, and this fighter says that he says that they're on the right side, they're on the righteous side of this battle, and then he salutes Abu Hadi, Nasrallah, and Naim Qassem. See, the truck works; it works perfectly good. He goes off in another one of these trucks. I showed you this with the Fadi truck launchers as well. These launchers have been struck. Hezbollah fixes them and gets them back out into the field to carry out these operations. Rocket operations in the last week, this counts as one. What you're watching here counts as one operation. This would be one field report. Sometimes it's just a line in a field report that has multiple of these launches, but you can see this is a single operation. This week there was 40 rocket operations. Last week there was 90, and the week before there was 85. So these are a constant at Israeli troops in South Lebanon, hammering them with these rockets, and also qualitative missiles that they're hitting them with as well. There was 12 missile ops this week itself, and 2 firefights. So there was 2 confrontations with that required the fighters in the south to have a gun. The Israelis don't want the smoke at all. They don't want to fight. And it's possible to be a resistance fighter in South Lebanon fighting against the Israeli army and literally not need your gun because they won't come close enough to fight. They carry everything out. As soon as the Israelis get contact, they pull back and they call in airstrikes. And so as a result, there was 2 firefights. Last week, there was 1 firefight, and the week before, there was 0 firefights. So 3 in 21 days of intense battle. So just remarkable. And there's the legend in the front seat giving the victory sign from his truck that works perfectly fine. And 33, that is 33. So he's the legend. Yeah, you can see there that the truck works perfectly well and executed that mission. So this has been the Resistance Report for day 986 of Israel's genocide in Gaza and day 109 of Hezbollah's defense of South Lebanon.
Thank you so much, John. Again, just the resourcefulness, especially in that last little segment, using available tools, using basically the chassis of an 18-wheeler to make it usable again to defend their country. It's
so many FPVs
incredible.
this week.
Yeah.
I try to show you one legendary rocket adaptation a week because it's just really remarkable. I mean, using like those bongo trucks, like a small ice cream truck, and then having a 32 rocket launcher on the back of it is just fierce fighting, and and because of that fierce resistance, Israel can't advance.
Israel should really be welcoming the deal as a face-saving way to end its latest disastrous invasion of Lebanon. Israel has never succeeded in gaining a stable foothold in Lebanon. Yes, it has occupied large parts of the country for periods of time, including a long stretch of 20 years, but it faced constant and costly resistance throughout.
Every single time. That's right.
So it should be welcoming the deal, but that's how pathological and just disconnected from reality Israel is, that they want to continue seeing their soldiers wiped out by these FPV drones. I mean, you almost feel sorry for anyone in that position of they see it coming and there's nothing they can do. But Israel, of course, has never had any pity or humanity or mercy for the victims of its massacres and genocide.
No, what Israel's done is they've got their own FPV drones and they show their own videos, and they're invariably killing civilians. Last week they killed
injured people, people on roofs.
Forces soldier on a motorcycle who are supposed to be the people that Israel wants to hold South Lebanon for them. So it's just the juxtaposition between Hezbollah's constant military targets and Israel's almost exclusive civilian targets is just always very stark. It was stark in Gaza as well.
Yeah, continues to be all the way. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jon. And as we mentioned earlier in the program, next week, Ali, you're going to be working in Switzerland, doing the thing that you intended to do.
Yes. This time, hopefully, a successful visit without any unwanted Swiss government hospitality. That's my hope. And just a reminder that the event will be Tuesday evening in Zurich. Watermelon University, I think they're on Instagram, and they'll have the details. And tomorrow, Friday, I'll publish an article about my upcoming visit and what I'll be doing and some of the legal updates. And I'll include a link to that information as well if you're in or near Zurich and you'd like to come and attend on Tuesday.
Wonderful. Thank you. And best of luck with your welcome committee in Zurich next week.
Thank you.
But there will be a regular show next Thursday, same time, same place. And Ali, as we always do, let's take a look at the website and talk about some of the newest features that we've published and the reports. There's one by our colleague Dave.
Yes, there was a big arms show in France, and you know, it's just so disgusting, the literal merchants of death that attend these arms shows. And of course, Israel is always involved, even when there are sort of cosmetic French measures to restrict the Israeli presence. It's not really restricted. So Dave with the dirt, as usual.
As usual. Thank you, Dave. Measly French measures have little impact on Israel's weapons makers there, right at the top of electronicintifada.net. We also have a few new features. There's the one by Qasim Walid Al-Farah that I read earlier in the newscast. Our futures are shrinking. Just an extraordinary narrative that he wrote. And I only was able to read an excerpt of it. So do go back and read the whole piece. It's remarkable. We also have our colleague Maureen Claire Murphy's Palestine in Pictures.
This is a great one. The latest, just published a couple of days ago. It takes you there. It takes you in deep. That beautiful photo there of a Palestinian woman with the key, a very symbolic photo, given that May was the 78th year since the Nakba. And that's Zainab Barhum, 91 years old, with the key to her home. And she and her family fled on camels from Bir Saba to Rafah during the Nakba. And now she is once again displaced from Rafah to Al-Mawasi during this genocide. So just so many layers of suffering, and some of the pictures here are very intense. A picture is worth 1,000 words, as they say. But also there are incredible words with this piece where Maureen provides just such a comprehensive roundup and analysis of the events over the past month. So this is really an incredible way to witness and learn about what is happening in Gaza and around Palestine, and not to let that be forgotten.
Yeah. Thanks for that. And yes, check out Maureen Claire Murphy's monthly feature, Palestine in Pictures, there on the top of our features list. And there's so much more. Obviously, check out everything that we have written in the last week on electronicintifada.net. And in order to keep this publication and this live stream going, we rely on you, our viewers and readers and listeners. Ali, who do we have to thank this week?
Well, so many people, and again, people have made gifts during the program. They've either gone to the website and hit the donate now button, or they've gone to the links in the YouTube description, and they've been very generous during the program, and we really appreciate that. So Anwar Ali, Tracy, Inga, Douglas, thank you so much. And some people who've made gifts since our last show. We're very grateful to you, Tara, Christopher, Alexandra, Ashura, Ezgi, Sylvia, and we're super grateful to our monthly donors, because you allow us to plan, to know that we have a regular stream of income coming in, so we don't have to worry about that. We can focus on producing the best journalism, the best analysis, the best live stream, the best features. That's what we want to do. We hate having to spend time on doing anything else. That is what we want to do. We want to bring you the best. So some of our monthly donors: Shubha, Odette, Yosef, Michal, Salim, John, Hodan, and Sebastian. Thank you so much. And if you want to make a monthly gift, again, you can go to the electronicintifada.net, hit the donate now button, or the links in the YouTube, and you have the option of making a small or large monthly donation, whatever suits you. And if you can't afford to make a gift, that's okay. We want the people who can afford it to do so, so that this information, this journalism is free and available to everyone in the world.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you to all of our contributors and people who are donating to keep this magical platform. And
25 years.
It's incredible.
It's incredible. You know, I'm just seeing Robin in the comments mentioning, thanks EI for 25 years of being the best for Gaza. Well, I don't know if we're the best. We try to be. There's some extraordinary journalists out there, but yes, 25 years. I wish it hadn't been. I wish we did not need to be here. I hope we or others won't be doing this in 25 years, because we want to see Palestine free. We want to see real peace, real justice for everyone. But we think that good information and honest journalism is a contribution to peace and justice, and that's why we do this.
That's right.
We're working really hard to make ourselves redundant.
All right. Well, thank you, of course, to everyone who's donated and keeps donating. Of course, you can hit the donate now link on electronicintifada.net or by the links below here on the YouTube channel. Of course, I want to thank Tamara Nassar, our producer and director. Thank you so much, Tamara. Thank you to our colleagues at the Electronic Intifada. Thanks to Ellie Gerzon for social media, Pierre Loisel for radio production, and on behalf of myself, Asa, John, Ali, and Tamara, thank you all, and we will see you next week.